Yes, so welcome to the Technology Career Acceleration Summit. We put on these events quarterly, but we also put on other events. For example, Carlotta, who is here with us today, we had an event with her last month. So sometimes we invite individual speakers where we interview them about their career in tech. Today, we're fortunate enough to have four incredible panelists that have worked in some awesome tech companies, some awesome startups, and they have been through it all. Everyone on this call started off where everyone does start off, which is in a place where sometimes it's a little bit more difficult to figure out how am I going to navigate my career? How am I going to make sure that I get the best possible opportunities? So we're going to get to hear their stories throughout today. Again, we have Liz Warner, Sagar Patel, Howard Byrd, and Carlotta Zorsi. So I'm going to walk you through the agenda. We will get started in a few minutes here with our panel questions. It'll be pretty straightforward. The first 10 to 5 minutes, we're just going to finish our introduction here. Then for the next 40 minutes or so, we will be going through some questions for our panelists. We'll get an introduction from all of them as well. And we do, again, encourage you to drop your questions into the chat if you have them. We will be monitoring that periodically. We have Kristen here on our team who is helping out as well. So we'll try not to miss any of your questions. If you forget something, remember that in the second half of the event, 6:50 to 7:30 or so, we'll have a couple of breakout sessions where we're going to put two panelists in each room with half of us, and then two panelists obviously in the other room. Sergey and I are going to split up. He's going to take our cute little puppy that's here on his lap and go on another side of the room, and he'll be in one room, I'll be in another. And then what we'll do after the first 20 minutes is the attendees, you guys will stay put. The panelists, we'll move you to another room. And that way, everyone here will get to interact with all the experts that are here today. So if you have specific questions about their jobs, about how it is to work in their companies, we have people representing startups like Micmac and early stage startups like Gleam, but also they have experience in companies like Google, Oracle, BuzzFeed, AOL, literally you name it. I'm probably missing some of the logos. So if you're curious about what it is to like to work in those companies, make sure you ask those questions. And of course, you can save those questions for the second half of the event. Again, especially in the second half, we do encourage you to enable your video so that we can see you and the panelists can see you as well.
Great. And also I want to give a welcome to I see Chiara's here from Buenos Aires. Thank you for joining us. We have some folks from New Jersey, Brian, Jessica from New York, a couple people from Tampa, which is awesome. And then I know that we have a few folks like Ethan from Spokane, who's in our Tech Career Acceleration Program. He's going through our cohort right now. So thanks for joining us, folks. We love that you're from all over, that you're hearing about these events. And we encourage for you to keep coming to them. We have these types of events either with a panel of speakers like this or sometimes with individual speakers who you can learn directly from. We believe that learning from the people that are in the roles that you want, the leaders in the kind of companies that you want to be part of, is the best way to learn how to navigate your career. Not necessarily from a career services department, although they can be good. Not necessarily from a career coach, although they can be good. Better to learn from a practitioner who's in the role themselves. And that's why we have folks coming in these events consistently from these types of companies.
All right. And lastly, before we get started, if you are looking to advance your career in tech, especially around non-technical roles in tech, which is our expertise, we do encourage you to apply to our selective 8-week career acceleration program that's starting in June, where you get to learn directly from experts like the folks on this call today and like the folks that you see on the screen. The deadline's coming up soon. We give priority to early applicants. And so you can go ahead and head to school16.co/program for that. All right, last but not least, here's a link to the survey. We will provide that for you again at the end of the conversation. We do have another event coming up in a few weeks. If you're on our email list, you will hear about that. It's a director of product at PayPal. And of course, if you want to hear from us in other avenues other than email, feel free to follow us on social media, Instagram and LinkedIn, School16 and School16 Co. All right, I'm going to stop sharing the screen now so that we can get started. Thank you so much, everybody, for being patient. I'm seeing a lot of faces here, which is awesome. Thank you for enabling your videos. If you didn't enable it, it's okay. We forgive you, and we'll try to remember your names. But we're going to move on to starting off with our panelists. Again, thank you so much for joining us, Carlotta, Sagar, Howard, and Liz. We're going to start off by hearing from all of you, and it's going to be pretty straightforward. We just want to hear a quick 30 to 60 second elevator pitch about your career and how it progressed. We're going to dive deeper, but we're going to try to keep it a little tight here so that we have a chance to hear from all of you. And today we're going to start with Sagar.
Cool. Hey everyone, I'm Sagar. So just a little bit overview on my career. So I originally started in finance, did a few years in investment banking, then went to private equity. Really at the end of it, I realized that finance wasn't the thing I wanted to focus on long term. And so moved to do something more entrepreneurial for a few years. I think that's really what solidified my passion and understanding of ops. And so we were working on a pre-seed company. We ended up moving, or sorry, I ended up moving to a larger stage company, which is now DoorDash, focused on their operations team. And so have kind of been focused on that going forward.
Okay, awesome. Thank you. And apologies for mispronouncing your name early. Okay, next up, we're going to go to Liz Warner.
Hi, everyone. My name is Liz. I'm a former video producer at BuzzFeed. So I was one of the early video producers there. And I was there for 6 years until 2020 when I started working on my own startup on this video-based dating app called Gleam. And that is what I focus on now.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Liz. That was a very tight pitch. I appreciate it. Cool. Next, I'm going to go to one of our returning guests, Carlotta Zorsi.
Hi, guys. So my career kind of the opposite of Liz. I started from startups, actually, in Silicon Valley. That's where I really started my career. And then when I moved to London, I started working in media agencies, basically. And then eventually I moved to Oracle, specifically in the part of Oracle that focuses on ad tech. So that's where my expertise sits in ad tech, the whole ad tech space and MarTech.
Got it. Very cool. And let's give some snaps for Carlotta for staying up late. It's 11:15 right now in London, in the UK. So we appreciate you joining us super late at night. And then lastly, Howard, if you could please introduce yourself.
Sure, Howard Byrd. Some similar to Cigar. I came out of school in finance around 2008 when the financial bubble started. I was already thinking about pivoting. I went over, got an opportunity to work at Google on Google Maps at the time, and then parlayed that into a stint at AOL, a stint at what was that company I was at for a while? I can't remember the company for a minute. That just went Oracle actually acquired them. It was CrowdTwist. Then from CrowdTwist, went to Hitwise, and now currently at Micmac. So progressed my career from more of a digital to more of a SaaS play, which was kind of where my passion is and where I'm currently at a company called Micmac, where we do e-commerce acceleration currently.
Awesome. Thank you, Howard. As you can see, folks, there's a reason why we invite people that represent all sorts of different careers and career paths. There is no one way to get into tech. Sometimes you start in a smaller company and as a startup, sometimes you start at a big bank, sometimes you start in sales, sometimes you do something a little bit different. There's many different pathways. That's part of the reason why we love tech. That's where we started our careers. Well, we started in finance. Long story, you'll hear about it at some point, I'm sure, if you come to these events. But tech has enabled us to navigate our careers in very interesting ways, similar to the panelists that we see here. And so we want you to hear their stories to see maybe how you could do it yourself.
And so my first question then will be to Sagar, and I know Sagar and Howard, you guys actually both started off in finance in different roles. We did as well. And I know there's a lot of folks, we have a lot of college students that come to these events, or people that are going to grad school, and a lot of folks that are considering, they want to get into business careers. Let's call it broadly business, or they want to be business leaders. Sounds cool. And one of the paths is, hey, let me go get a Big 4 or Big 5 consulting job, or let me get into an investment banking kind of job. Or you could go into tech directly, perhaps go join a startup or go join one of the big tech companies. Sagar, what's your opinion on that? I know you have the experience of going to finance, then having a startup, and then going to a really fast growing company that's now public. If you were kind of starting over, would you recommend going, if you want to be a business leader, going right into tech, or the path that you took, you would keep the same?
Yeah, I honestly would keep it the same. I think that if you were to ask me while I was in investment banking, I would have said that don't join this. But looking back, I've found it extremely valuable. I think that the skills that I developed around communication, project management, working with senior leaders across the org isn't something that I would have necessarily gotten at like a pre-seed startup. Those are like the extremely valuable skills that I still use today. It's helped me be successful in the role at DoorDash. And so I would recommend it. I think at a startup and now being at DoorDash for some time, it is like a crazy growth machine and things are going left and right. And I think it's hard to always develop those skills in a structured way. So that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, that's interesting. I think you're absolutely right. And the earlier stage, the company, it's like you'll get more responsibility. And if you're kind of a self-starter and you learn more independently, that actually could be a great path for you. But getting into an organization where you can develop some of those skills and even actually honestly get some of that pedigree could be really helpful. What about you, Howard? I know you weren't a big fan of your job, not so long after you joined. Would you do the same, or would you do differently if you were to start over?
I don't listen. I think everything in life happens for a reason. So looking back, I think I would probably do it all over again the same, because, one thing I learned early was being independent, an individual contributor. Obviously, I'm still an individual contributor in my own right, but in the finance world, it was a little bit, it's a little different. A bunch of us came from finance. It's a little more, not say cutthroat, but I think it's just, you have to be a really more senior person to really have some success, for a long-term career. But, being around some senior folks to kind of teach you how to manage your business, manage your day-to-day, how to kind of go about, prospecting and building a business from scratch. I think just once I got into tech, it was so much easier and I was a lot more advanced because it's different. It's a different world, right? You're dealing with folks that this is their personal money. Now you're dealing with companies that this is not their money, right? You're kind of dealing with the person that has a title and you're trying to help them figure out or do their job better, right? So now the conversation's a little bit different, a little bit more fluid. And now since you manage your own business, now you have a team of folks that kind of help you kind of put those pieces together. So it makes it a little bit easier. They made that learning curve a lot easier for me, I think, in that respect, coming from a financial background, if that makes sense.
Interesting. Makes sense. Sounds like both of you were pretty lucky to work at organizations where you were able to develop that professionalism, which helped you later on. So I think, the moral of those answers for me is join a team and join people that you can actually learn from, and then the next gig is going to be much easier to succeed in. Makes sense.
The other thing that I picked up on that you mentioned, Howard, was that you're still an individual contributor in some ways and in your own right. And folks, I want you to understand also that I think oftentimes when we're starting off our careers, it's like we're hurrying to get the best responsibilities. We really want to make strategic decisions. We really want to make sure that people trust us with really important things. And the fact of the matter is that even as you get more and more senior, you're still going to be doing some individual contributor work, obviously. And more importantly, sometimes you'll have to do work that you don't want to do. And that's okay. You have to recognize that's okay. And especially if you join an earlier stage startup, but certainly a growth stage startup, you're just going to have to be really good at and okay with picking things up that are kind of being dropped, filling gaps where they exist. That's what's going to make you an asset to these teams. I want to go to Liz next. And the question I was thinking about for you, Liz, is, you started off as a Spanish major, I believe, and then you started off in marketing before you ended up getting into content production. Can you talk about that story a little bit? How were you able to convince folks early on to let you work as a marketer without too much experience and without a marketing major?
Yeah, so I always do. I want to go into video production, and that was just like what I wanted to do, but I didn't want to major in it because I just felt like I could teach myself video production and I didn't need to like spend my college career on it. So I ended up majoring in business and Spanish, and then during like my summers I would intern at different like news stations or different like production stations, and so that's what gave me the experience, and that was kind of like all they care about anyways, like where have you worked before.
Gotcha. That makes sense. So obviously you had a really great career at BuzzFeed. We'll try to dig into that a little bit later, but now you're starting your own company, your own dating app.
Mhm.
What do you think prepared you most in all of your experience since college until now to be an effective tech startup operator?
Great question. I still don't feel fully prepared. I would say, I started at BuzzFeed when it was like very few people on the video team. And so I got a lot of firsthand experience, like being part of what was then a startup. And also, just like you said, like filling in the gaps, like we had so many different roles. And then I also got to like, you know, experience those like growing pains as well, because I kind of grew with the company. And I think that is definitely what prepared me the most, because I basically just had to take on so many roles there that I feel as prepared as I can be for this.
Interesting. And how big was BuzzFeed when you joined them?
Oh my gosh, the video team was like maybe 10 people, if that. It was like super small. We like would grab cameras out of drawers. It was so tiny.
Fight over the cameras. That's awesome.
Basically, yeah. Fist fight.
That's really cool. Awesome. Thank you, Liz. And so then Carlotta, you basically took the opposite approach and you started, I believe, doing marketing for startups early on. Obviously, you went the agency route afterwards. You ended up at Oracle, where you do partnership work, account management, sales type work. If you were to do it over again, would you do it differently? Do you think you would try to start at a big company, or do you feel like that small company early experience was invaluable for you?
Oh, I love this question. Do you know what? Like back then, when I was in Silicon Valley, I would have loved to join a big company. I just didn't get the chance. I didn't get the chance. So I was like, okay, let's go with the startup side of things, because I'm in Silicon Valley and it makes sense to get that experience. And I'm so grateful that it actually happened that way. Because I really think, as you said earlier, I got to experience a breadth of tasks that otherwise I probably wouldn't have got exposed to in a big company, because I had to deal with investors, I had to deal with, you know, potential partners, things that at a big company very much wouldn't have had exposure to, because it would have been a very specific type of role, right? Usually internships are very specific. So I'm really happy that it didn't work out the way I thought I wanted it. And eventually that experience is what made me land the Oracle role later on. So we'll always treasure that experience in startups, like to begin with. And I wouldn't really exclude going back to startups at some point, because having had the big company experience now, somehow I miss a bit the agility of a small company. There's different pains from a small and a big company. So who knows?
I agree with that. And I mean, I'm sure in these early companies, you had direct visibility to the founders and or CEO. That's just something you're not going to get at a massive company. You might not even get visibility to a VP, especially if you're starting off. So I love that example. There is no one clear path. Sometimes it's good to start as a banker. Sometimes it's good to start right in a startup. Sometimes it's good to start in a big company. And then in Liz's example, joining a company that's relatively small and growing really, really quickly. It's more about how you position yourself, the skills you're developing, of course, and then how you position yourself and your narrative and your story to make yourself sound valuable to future employers. So if you don't have right now, if you're sitting here and you don't have that great job at that great name brand company like Facebook or something, don't fret. It's okay. You can still create a really, really amazing career, and maybe you'll end up at Facebook. Who knows?
Yeah. Actually, speaking of that, I wanted to ask a quick follow-up question to what you just said, Carlotta. You mentioned that it really was helpful. That experience was really helpful in helping you land the role at Oracle, which is just a much different type of organization. In what way do you think it was most helpful?
I think it was quite helpful because as I said, I tried different things and I was exposed to different people. So I really got used to dealing with VPs, directors, founders. I was always surrounded by entrepreneurs, and that really taught me how to relate myself to people that, you know, when you first start off, you might feel a bit intimidated by, because you feel like, oh, these people have got so much experience, I'm a little nobody, I don't really have a name for myself. And I was in that environment where the CEO of the company was dragging me around to all these entrepreneurial events that gave me those skills to connect and get curious and listen to what all these creators had to say. And therefore, I think it gave me the skills, the people skills that were needed to get the confidence needed to work in a bigger company, where it's a bit harder to establish yourself because there's hundreds of thousands of people in an Oracle. It's like 140,000 people around the world. So it's a huge organization. So having that ability to know how to connect with people regardless of their title, I think was very something that I carried with me from my startup days.
Yeah, yeah, and Jess in the chat just wrote executive presence, which is exactly what you're talking about here. And the
Yeah.
comfort, a lot of people in a lot of jobs say comfort with taking, with communicating with different stakeholders or leaders or C-level executives. And you might be reading that and thinking like, well, that sounds like, how do you get comfortable with that? But it really is with experience, understanding that even C-level executives are humans and you can talk to them like humans. And over time, once you get that professionalism and actually understand what their problems are, understand how to communicate with them in a way that shows that you understand their priorities, but also that they're human and you could just talk to them like a regular person too, in a way. That's how you get that executive presence. And you're right, that just takes sort of several years of just doing it. Even in a couple of months, you can get comfortable in a particular job, but after a couple of years, you get much more comfortable. So if you're not confident with that yet, don't feel too worried about it. But that's a really good point. So the communication skills really help. Sagar, I'm really curious to ask you, because you went from an investment banking role and then another stint of a year as an associate at another company to founding your own company that you ran for several years. And now, as a relatively young guy, you are a director of product operations at a publicly traded company, which is like not an easy thing to get as a role. Of course, you rose through the ranks at that company, but I'm curious, what was that formative experience in that startup that you founded? And what were some of those skills that you developed, do you think, that helped you succeed in your next role at DoorDash?
Yeah, of course. So I'd say that some of the biggest things I learned when starting the company was just do. Like in investment banking and in finance, you can build a financial model and write 3% in the financial model, which means sales will grow by 3%. I think the thing I've, at least at the time, failed to realize was someone actually has to go out there and sell the product. And so the experience in starting my own company really just helped me understand, just do things and figure out what works and what doesn't work. At DoorDash, we also value that. The team here really values that. We'd rather have you do something tomorrow, tell us it's the wrong answer, than wait 10 weeks and give us the perfect answer. I'd say like that's probably one of the biggest things that I've taken away from the entrepreneurial experience. At DoorDash, I would say really the big things that I've taken away, which I would say also are an outcome of this startup experience. One of them is treat the business like it's your own company. And I think being a pre-seed company, like literally every day we're trying to figure out how do we survive the next day and have enough money, that has really carried over into DoorDash. Anyone can come into the role and work 9 to 5, do what they're asked for on paper. But the folks that actually treat DoorDash and the company like it's their own company, and those are the folks that succeed really well. And I think I've had an ability to bring that to the table. And I'd say the last thing with that is just getting outside your lane. Again, like we hire folks for product operations, or we hire folks for marketing, and the people that are just doing that function don't necessarily move up quickly in the organization. It's the ones that will go out of their way and find opportunities, even if they're on the marketing team, to improve the operations of the business. And I think those things have helped me really be successful.
Yeah, no, I love that. Essentially being willing to pick up whatever needs to get done. I think famously Reid Hoffman, when he was an early employee at PayPal, was called like the firefighter of the organization, because he was just willing to just put out any fires that came their way. He would just figure it out, honestly, whether it was compliance or whatever it was. And I think for an operations role in particular, if you're going to be an operational leader or even an operational contributor to a company, you want that ops title. You have to be that person that's just kind of willing to pick up the pieces, figure out how to create processes where there are none, be super responsive when you need to be. These are really critical traits that they can't be underscored enough. So I appreciate that. That makes a lot of sense. Cool. I have a question for you, Howard, as well, because I know that early career transition, wasn't necessarily easy. You started off in finance and ended up deciding to go into sales, and then you even transitioned in sales to another type of sales role later on. And I think you did so with pretty effective networking. Can you talk a little bit about how you were able to get those opportunities where maybe other people wouldn't as easily?
Um, you know, it's as simple as Cigar's point is well, you have to adapt. I think more than anything is you have transferable skills, right? What I picked up in finance, what I parlayed that into at Google, doing more than what was asked of me, working longer than most of my colleagues, really being proficient at the product, and really understanding, hey, listen, we're in a space where it's very convoluted. We're in space, especially a person of color. I'm pretty much always been the only sales guy of color at every organization I've been at, and the roles I've been. So it's you got to kind of raise your own bar. And like you said, networking is a big thing. Going from Google, knowing somebody, in my time there to being the first hire at AOL for my division at Patch. Once I saw the kind of the tea leaves, I was like, all right, I've been selling this for a while, but at that time, you know, display wasn't as it is now. But at the same time, I knew for myself, the data always kind of drove me. So when I started to make that pivot into SaaS, I kept getting a lot of tension, like, oh, you're selling display, now you're selling SaaS, you want to go into SaaS. So I had to take a junior role, being like an SDR for a couple of months just to get a sales role, So I took a step back to get a step forward, and I had to really do that really well to say, all right, well, give me an opportunity to sell. In my mind, I knew it was kind of the same thing, but at that time they were like, no, it's different. I'm like, no, it's kind of the same. It's still, but again, just really that having that tenacity and a belief in yourself to say, listen, I can do this. Right. And, and screw what the naysayers are saying. I can do this, and make that work. Is kind of like what I can tie it to be successful and think in anything you do, right? But definitely in a sales role, you gotta know what you have to know what you're putting forward in order, because quickly you're gonna get figured out if you don't know what you're talking about, right? Or if you're selling to yourself, you're lying to yourself that, hey, I'm doing more than I am. Trust me, the proof is always gonna be in the pudding. So again, and to be successful in anything you gotta do, you gotta come out of your lane and come out of your comfort factor, a lot of times before things kind of make sense.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that, and I know, especially going from obviously from one career to another, you had to. Sometimes you have to take a step back, and I think that is okay. A lot of people are scared about saying, well, should I maybe not take a more junior role than I had before? I mean, Sagar, I know you went from being a COO of your own company to a manager role at DoorDash when it was growing quick, and now you rose up and you're a director role. Sometimes you have to say, okay, for me to, in order to get into a certain opportunity or to change my career, I might have to kind of swallow my pride, take a little bit more of a junior role, maybe a pay cut if I can, if I can stomach it and I can afford it. But then obviously prove yourself in those 3 months at that SDR role. I'm sure you crushed your quota, and then they gave you another opportunity. And even though, in the beginning, you kind of had to really promote yourself, but then later it's just about proving yourself once you're in the role, and then you'll get to where you want to be.
You just want access. That's all it's about. Just having access to the company, or having access to the type of role you do want to have, right? I couldn't have that conversation if I was still if I wasn't in the company at all, right? I had to get in to say, all right, now I'm in. All right, how do I move these swim lanes to kind of get to that thing I really want? That's it. And then sometimes, use the company as a pivot to the next thing, right? Because you're saying, all right, this is what they're doing here, but I can do this here, and then I can do that next thing there.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'll tell you folks right now, if you can communicate to the company that you're looking to join exactly how you're going to be adding value from day one or even day 30 to 90, they're going to want to hire you because they're looking to solve a very specific problem, and they'd rather not wait another 2, 3, 4 weeks to find somebody else. But it's up to you to make sure that you figure out how to communicate it to them. It's also why the spray and pray approach of looking at opportunities typically doesn't work. It does work sometimes, but usually a well-targeted approach where it really makes clear sense for why you're going after a particular opportunity is much better. Thanks for that, Howard. Next, I'm going to go to Liz, and I'm going to try to frame this question in a way that makes sense. But, you know, when you were at BuzzFeed and it was growing, obviously BuzzFeed is one of those things, you know, folks, we're talking about tech here, but also we're talking about tech-enabled organizations. BuzzFeed is a media company, right? It's effectively a publication. It's a tech company, but it's a media company. And when you're in a company like BuzzFeed, obviously there's a lot of pressure to perform, making sure you're coming up with great content that's actually generating revenue at the end of the day. That's all that matters for them. Can you talk about, you know, what you think in your experience gave you the confidence to be able to apply your creative mind and your creative abilities in a way that actually turns dollars for the company? Maybe what it was in your background or what you learned while you were at BuzzFeed to actually, let's face it, give them an ROI on the investment that they made in you.
Yeah, so obviously, like, you know, views were one of the most important things, and shares. So we spent a lot of time, you know, looking at metrics, and there'd be like leaderboards. So it was very like technical in that sense. And I think what like helped me excel was that it was very data driven, and I would look at, you know, which content like performed the best, and then you basically make hypotheses based off of that to create then like more content. And you also not only base it off of what you're making, but off of like what your peers and the rest of the internet is making as well, like what's successful and what does well. So it wasn't even necessarily confidence, it was just like a lot of data that I would look at, and then I would just take my own like personal creative flair and then infuse that into the content that I would make.
Interesting. So did you learn on the job how to collect that data, how to analyze it? Did you just kind of figure it out yourself? Did you have a mentor? What was the process?
Yeah, I mean, I didn't know how to use a camera when I started. So I definitely just taught myself everything like while I was there. And a lot of the um, data, whatever, leaderboards and everything were like being built also as I was there. So it was kind of like you kind of got to learn with other people as you grew. And yeah, you also got to like contribute to it as well. So definitely learned pretty much everything as I went.
So then, you know, if you didn't even know how to use a camera when you joined the company, what do you think is the number one reason why they hired you?
So I started as an intern, and then so you're not like really fully hired, you kind of have to like prove yourself. And so I did a lot of the things that you guys talked about, which is like, you know, filling in the gaps and like contributing anytime anyone needed help with anything. Like I was just, you know, I was like a smart enough person, I could figure it out, and like just took off a lot of the work that people didn't want to do, and I would just do it. So, you know, I developed really strong relationships with people. And then in that time, I also just like spent my hours after just like learning how to shoot and edit and all those other skills that actually needed when I took on like the next level of role.
Yeah, that's helpful to understand. So you really, if you have to invest your own time into learning something, you have to do that. You know, you don't have to necessarily take a class in it, but you absolutely have to do that. And you know, speaking of that, a lot of folks, and this question right now is for Carlotta, but others can answer it as well. A lot of folks tend to think that if you're gonna succeed in tech, you have to be kind of technical, or at least somewhat technical. Did you find that to be true, Carlotta, or no?
That's an interesting question. So I don't think you necessarily have to be technical, but you have to have at least the hunger and the curiosity to learn the technology that you will be selling or, you know, helping clients with. As Howard was saying, you need to know what you're talking about. And especially if you're in an environment where you're selling and when you're looking after potential issues, if your knowledge is lacking, you don't come across as knowledgeable. So some level of curiosity and technical understanding, I think, is needed, but that comes with time. It's not expected, especially when you first start out. Attitude is more important than your actual technical knowledge. And I think that's something that people should really keep in mind. Don't be afraid of, you know, oh, I can't learn it. Of course you can. Trust in your brain. You will figure it out. That type of knowledge comes with training, comes with doing the job every day, comes from observing people, shadowing. So the knowledge comes with time. Focus more on, you know, if you have to work with clients, get that soft skills across, show that you can actually be reputable with a client, show that you can be credible and come across as trustworthy. Knowledge comes afterwards.
Yeah, no, I 100% agree with that. You learn a lot through osmosis, so to speak, when you work with the tool over time, when you're forced to explain it to somebody, you get to know it. One thing that I've done, and I've been in sales roles where I sold very technical products to like chief information officers or engineers, is I would ask time with our own engineers in the company to have them explain it to me and really dumb it down to me. And if somebody didn't explain it the right way, I would go to another person and ask them to explain it to me again until I understood it. And, obviously studying the product inside out, using it yourself so you understand the value of all the features, all that stuff is so critical for you to get comfortable enough to then, be able to be literate. I think being literate in the technology that you're working with is sort of the bare minimum. But that's something that can happen over time.
Yeah, and it's also knowing when to bring in the right specialists, right?
Mhm.
You won't know everything. You won't know all the technical details, but you have to understand what the question is. So then you can bring in the people who can really drill down onto the technical aspects that are needed for that conversation, I would say.
I'm glad you brought that up, because that's one of the first things that I do if I ever join an organization, regardless of the size, is I just try to get on the calendar with as many people as possible, especially if they're technical. But that's because I've been in like quasi-technical roles like sales engineering. Because first of all, if you're on the business end or you're connecting them to the business end and you can prove to them that you really care about how they work, their job and their challenges, you're going to win their hearts in the end of the day. That's how you win the hearts of technical people usually on the teams. But that is how you get really good at your job really quickly, is just absorb as much information as possible. And no one's really going to tell you to do that. I mean, maybe in some companies they will. You just have to take the initiative, not be afraid to ping somebody on Slack or Skype or whatever tool they use internally to communicate, and ask for 15, 20, 30 minutes of their time to learn about their role, their challenges, and the like. I would advise that all of you do that, regardless of size of company, when you enter a new organization.
So folks, feel free to start writing some questions in the chat. We will go into the breakout rooms in a few minutes, but we do want to answer some of your questions if you have them now. In the breakouts, we're going to dive a little bit deeper into what the roles are actually like that our panelists have, and you can ask more specific questions about that as well.
But while we're waiting for questions to come in, similar question to Howard, can you think of a time or an example where maybe earlier on, or maybe even recently, where you had to you weren't really savvy with a particular piece of technology, or you just felt like you were lost and in over your head and you had to figure it out? Maybe there's a specific example you can think of.
And that happens all the time. So, anytime you learn a new product as a salesperson, I was selling my last product for almost 4 years, right? So now I'm selling something new, right? Completely, SaaS is still the same, but it's a different technology, the audience is a little bit different, so anytime you want to get proficient at it to sell it, you have to learn it yourself. And I always got, one thing I learned early was, if you could explain it to your friends or your family members in a layman's way that they get it, then you know it, right? Until you can do that to the layman's, then you really don't know the product. And similar to Carlotta's point, as a salesperson, listen, I bring in my tech people all the time. Even if I know the product in and out, from a sales perspective, it just sounds a little bit better if someone else can kind of talk to a more specific point, and it makes those sales go a lot more smoothly, and it just makes it easier, because if it comes from you all the time, then it sounds like you're lying. I know if I was on the other side of it, I'd be like, man, you know all these technical parts too, even though you do, but just to have an expert that's, listen, this is what I do all day long. We have like a client success person, or we have a dashboard person. All they do all day is just go in the dashboard and that's what they look at. I look at the dashboard really high level, just enough to sell it or just to present it. But at the same time, is a person that this is what they do all day. They actually build it, so have them come in and say, listen, hey, this is the dashboard guy. This is a person that you will actually work with directly once you actually buy this particular product. Let them kind of speak to you a little bit about how they use the dashboard, or how you can use this dashboard as it relates to your particular product. But learning is always a part of the business. You come into a company, the product changes, it adapts, you bring out new products based off of the environment or things are trending. So you constantly are always going to have to learn, right? And especially not just your own product, is you have to learn the competition too. That's just as important as your own, because when you're talking to prospects or potential people that you're looking to sell to, trust me, they've done their own homework as well. So if you're coming in not knowing it, at least who you're up against, how can you sell effectively based off of what your product does, right? Because your product doesn't do everything. Your product does some things very well, and then there's competitors things that do something pretty well too, right? It's just a matter of listening and understanding what your value is versus what the prospect is asking you. Or how you're looking to answer that question or answer those things that they came and raised their hand and said, you know what, I'm okay to listen to you. But learning is always going to be a part of anything you do, right? Because things just change. That's all.
Oh, that's absolutely true. Things do change. In technology, things change quite rapidly. And you're going to hear new terms all the time. You could be in the industry for 5, 10 years, 20 years. You're going to hear new terms all the time. And you have to be curious enough to go and do your own research. And the people that succeed, especially in sales roles, I would say, and account management roles, the people that succeed and hit it out of the park right away are the ones that just spend those extra few hours playing around with the product, reading documentation. It's boring, but you read it so you understand it, and so you can answer questions about it. To Howard's point, even doing competitive analysis where you go play around with other products, it makes you a stronger person, a stronger leader in the organization. So I appreciate that answer. We have some questions coming in here in the chat. We're going to address a few of them before, in the next 5 minutes or so, we're going to dive into our breakout rooms. But Riley had a question, and I'm going to pose this question to Sagar, which is, why does strategy, growth, and operations roles at tech companies often require 2 years of consulting or banking? What skills do banking and consulting give to help people thrive in these kind of tech growth strategy roles? What do you think?
Yeah, of course. So we also have this as a requirement for our team specifically. I think the biggest thing is the soft skills that you really develop in those areas. Both consulting and banking, even though they're fundamentally different, you are like a rock star on time management, communication, project management, how to work with senior stakeholders in the company, how to get around like blockers. And then I would say even most is like work ethic. Those are really the skills that I think that we look for and why we have it as a requirement. We've just seen the individuals that come from consulting and banking are able to be more successful in the role today, mainly because they have those soft skills.
Yeah, it's the soft skills, and you kind of also said something that is kind of in a reality, whether, I don't know if it's an unfortunate reality, but look, companies are looking for signals that you're going to be productive from day one. And if you come from one of these organizations like banking or consulting, it's almost like removing a little bit of the risk. Like, okay, this person's going to be organized, they're going to have good time management, etc. You don't have to come from those organizations, but that means you're going to have to do a little bit more work to prove yourself there, that you have those minimum skills to be successful. So that's really kind of the simple answer why those people tend to get those opportunities more. Juan has a question that I want to ask for Liz, which is technology a good industry to start with if you want to be an entrepreneur but don't know in which industry?
That's a good question. I mean, for myself, I think it was helpful, like growing into tech. It's nice because you can kind of experiment with like a lot of different things. But also like the only way you're ever really going to discover what you want to do is just by trying new things. So I wouldn't like put so much pressure on yourself to like figure it out right now. Like if there's something you like, just try it. And then if you don't like it, you can do something else. And that's what I got out of as well, like from working at BuzzFeed. I was like, okay, this is great, this is awesome, I love doing this, but I wanted to like try something new. And the reason I really like tech is because you can explore so many different things.
Yeah, it's absolutely right. And I 100% agree. Regardless of what industry you end up starting your company, Juan, and it's going to, by the way, you're going to end up starting companies based on what you're curious about, based on what problems you want to solve, based on what customers you want to serve. There's going to be all these elements, and you're going to figure out what you like. But tech touches everything. It doesn't matter if you're if you're selling cookies from a store, or you have an e-commerce business, or you have a software platform. You're going to be using Facebook advertising. You're going to be using different CRM tools. You're going to be using all these different tech platforms. You're going to have to have some fluency in tech, broadly speaking, to be a successful entrepreneur. So we're biased here. We are a tech company. This is a Tech Career Acceleration Summit. So we are talking about tech here, but we do think that it could be helpful regardless of where you start your business.
Before we go into the breakouts here, I'm going to combine Catherine's and Chiara, sorry if I'm mispronouncing your name, question together because it's kind of similar. And I'm going to go to Carlotta first. They're basically asking, if you're still in college, or maybe even if you're not, but you want to work in tech, what do you think is the number one thing you can add to your resume or have on your resume that's going to make you look attractive to employers? Very broad question, of course, because it could mean startups or established tech companies. But maybe think about the resumes that you look at. What's the number one thing that usually stands out that maybe these folks can think about adding to their resume?
I personally like to see how the story is crafted. So I think everybody has some extracurricular activities that they've done throughout their university time. And I think that can be a really good add-on to what your motivation is to join that company. So whether you headed up maybe marketing efforts for your local newspaper or whatever you did that is a bit extracurricular, that I think that can really help you craft the stories in why you want to join that company. And we talk about tech very broadly, but even if you think of a Google, an Oracle, there's so many different subsections, right? Obviously, for Oracle, ad tech is one tiny little bit. Everything else is like hardware, softwares. For Google, there's obviously ad tech, advertising is the biggest revenue generating part of the business, but then you also have maps, you have robotics, you have so many different elements. So you can probably get in from one part of the company through some of the extra experiences you had. And then once you're in, as Howard was saying earlier, find your way through the part of the company that actually attracts you the most. So use what you have done extra as a way to show the interest in the company. And once you're in, then make your way, find your way through that specific niche that you're interested in.
Thank you for that, Carlotta. I agree 100%. Folks, if you have volunteer experience, nonprofit experience, startups that you worked on that failed, startups that you joined where you add a little bit of value doing something for 3 months, that is still very valuable stuff to put on your resume. So get creative about how you communicate your narrative. It may very well be the reason why somebody ends up giving you a chance. Thank you for that, Carlotta. Sagar, what about you? What do you think? I don't know how many people you hire that are early on in their career, but similar answer, something different?
No, I would honestly say that's like spot on. I think the number one thing we look for is experience and initiative. Even as a college student, I can tell you there are probably hundreds of thousands of startups, early stage startups, where you can go up to their door and say, hey, I'll sell this product for you for free. And yeah, you may not be making some monetary incentive, but you are helping the technology company continue to grow. And when we were a pre-seed company, we had interns that came to us and said, hey, we'll help you with your sales, or we'll help you with operations. Those are, I'd say, like the most valuable things that we find when we look at candidates. A lot of individuals say they're interested in tech or they want to do tech, and then it stops there and they don't take initiative to actually demonstrate how they're moving towards that. And even small things of like, if you want to get into venture capital, personally, I was interested at one point to get into venture capital, and the headhunter was like, what technology blogs have you written up? And I had said nothing. Like, I was like, okay, there's other individuals who are like writing blogs on technology because they are interested in the space and they're taking initiative. So I would say that's probably the number one thing that has candidates stand out.
That's helpful. Thank you. The theme that kind of comes to mind for me is follow through. You can have the best looking resume in the world or narrative, whatever it is, but the number of people that just say they're interested, or you'll give them a hint like, hey, you should follow up with this person, and then they never actually do. You'd be surprised, folks. So if you are the type of person that does that, maybe that's why you're not advancing. But if you are the type of person that just takes it an extra step, oftentimes that is enough to stand out. So don't be afraid to follow up and follow through. That's going to help you in the long run. I appreciate that. Thank you. And really quickly, I'll address your question, Dina, that came in about what basic coding skills you need that could benefit you if you want to do an entry-level business position. Honestly, the answer is you don't really need any coding skills, but if you were to pick up anything, and I see Carlotta here saying, yep, you really don't. But if you're going to pick up anything, I would say HTML, CSS, JavaScript. It probably means that you'll be able to work with a marketing team to at least edit the landing page or something, so you don't have to go to the engineers. So get yourself familiar with that. Get yourself familiar with the difference between front-end and back-end languages and things like like that. That's about it. No one is going to be expecting you to write code from scratch in an entry-level role, but even in a more advanced role. All right, folks, we are at 6:66 Eastern here. Unlucky number, I guess, but by the time we get to the breakouts, it'll be in another minute or so. So here's what's going to happen. If you have some burning questions about the particular careers or career paths or day in the life type of things, for the panelists that are in the room, you can ask them in the next breakout session. Again, we're going to encourage you to enable your video. What's going to happen is you're going to get a little prompt in your Zoom screen to join a breakout. Kristen and our team has set up breakouts, and we're going to add 2 panelists to your room. We're going to be there for 20 minutes. After that, we're going to swap the panelists and move them to another room, but you can sit tight. So if the panelist that you're really looking to answer or ask a question of is not in your room, don't fret, just hang tight for 20 minutes. They'll be in your room a little bit later. So don't forget to click join when you see that prompt on your screen. Sergey is going to go to another room. I'm going to put on some headphones so that we don't bleed too much into each other's mics. But otherwise, start thinking of those questions, and you're going to get an opportunity to be in the breakout in a couple of seconds here. Don't forget to hit join. All right. And again, try to enable your video if you can. We'll see you folks in 30 seconds.
Folks in the room here, I'm going to hit record so we have a recording of the breakout as well. But looks like we have Howard and Carlotta in this room, and then we're going to switch speakers again in about 20 minutes or so. Folks, this is your time. You can already tell that me and Vadim can keep talking. We won't shut up if you don't let us. So we can do it, but we want you to ask questions. I'm going to ask the first question to kick it off to make it easier for you, but let me ask a first question to Carlotta, which is, can you tell us a little bit more about what your job actually is? Like what is that role at Oracle, if you can explain to give us a little bit more context?
Absolutely. So my role consists in looking after clients in a nutshell. This is called client servicing, account management, consulting. It has many different names, but specifically, I work with clients to create roadmaps and strategies that allow us to grow together and get at renewal stage to make sure that basically the client renews the contract with us. We work on a SaaS basis as well, so software as a service. And we want to make sure that what we're building is a trusted partnership. We want to make sure that we can endure challenges, and therefore it's very much about providing that support, those presentations that review the business and how we're doing together. It's reviewing data on a day-to-day basis. It's also providing dashboard walkthroughs to remember the client, to remind the client how the product really works and how they can make the most of it. So it really goes from more operational tasks that usually associate account managers deal with to more strategic roadmap work that I basically do on a day-to-day basis.
Super helpful. That makes sense. So that the larger organization, the more complex the product, the higher the ticket price. I'm sure some customers are paying you millions of dollars a year to use your product. You have to have dedicated account managers to help them make sure to leverage the product in the best way possible, get value from it, and continue using it year over year. Makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that, Carlotta. Howard, how about you? Can you walk us through a little bit about the day-to-day of what your role is like?
So my day-to-day consists of a managed portfolio of companies that I'm supposed to go after, so Fortune 1000 companies. So I have in my portfolio Nestle, the entire Nestle portfolio, Red Bull, I have Vitamix, just to name a few. So my role is to get them to buy our product. So that means speaking to, at least in an e-commerce perspective, people that are brand managers, people that are e-commerce managers, those type of folks are the folks that I normally speak to get a deal across the line. You should have about 3 or 4 conversations with any one of those type of folks. I might have to present our product anywhere from 4 or 5 times and then tie it all together, right? So it's really about tying it together, because if you think about those different roles, everyone has an agenda, right? Any company has an agenda. If you're talking to an e-commerce manager, they're thinking about, all right, how do I get more people to buy this product online? If you're thinking about a brand manager, his brand, he's managing a brand. It could be a particular, if you're thinking about Nestle, right? Nestle has, 15 different parts of the business at least. Nestle Waters, you have Purina cat chow, you got Purina dog food, so each one of those people have their own thing that they care about, right? So if you're trying to tie that together, you need to say, listen, here's my product, here how I can help you in your particular role do your job better, here how I can tie you together in your particular role to do it better, and let's get all of us together to kind of move towards this one thing, right? And that's sometimes the easy part, but then you have to deal with like procurement, right? Those are the people who say, all right, this is too much, or this is not a, this doesn't really fit with our timeline, so it's really, again, you really, I always say, like, I'm like liaisoning, right? I'm holding people's hand, and I'm just trying to get them to, to where I want them to get to, right? But it takes a lot of, it just takes a lot of listening. I think listening is probably the biggest skill. People in sales think like you're doing a lot of this. As you do it, the longer you do it, the more successful you do it, the less you talk. I swear to God, like I talk less and less as I'm getting older, because a lot of times the client or prospects will just tell you what they want, right? And it's for you to kind of normally just to reiterate it, right? And then tie it back to your value, right? And say, well, this is what I'm hearing. Am I on the same page? And you're just tying that together on how your product can help answer that question. And then also push them to the next thing, right? Because people are like, all right, that's great. Now what, right? It's literally holding hands. Like, all right, well, now we did this. So now the next thing we're going to do is this, right? The next thing, and you're really just trying to get them along the line to the finish line. So that's really at the nutshell of what I do. It's a lot of little technical parts. There's some boring stuff in there, like prospecting and, and writing reports and stuff like that. But the main of it is just tying things together to get to the end goal of selling a product.
Right. Now that makes a lot of sense. I appreciate that context. It's really hand holding the customer to be able to make that educated decision to purchase from you, not somebody else. And that's really the difference. Is your job is getting them to buy. Carlotta's job is getting them to stay and get a ton of value from the product. Two very different organizations, but similar missions there. Folks, I know I saw somebody start putting in the chat. I'll get to that question in a second, but I'd love to give an opportunity if somebody wants to unmute themselves and ask a question directly. This is your chance to do so. We're in a kind of small, intimate room here. There's only 22 of us. So anybody want to ask a question directly to Carlotta or Howard or both?
I would love to ask a question, actually, and thank you for the opportunity. I did want to ask, so I'm somebody who's actually getting an MBA, and I already have some career experience in non-technical roles and at a non-tech company. I've been adjacent to some tech companies, so I'm really interested in joining one and getting started, but not having that technical background. How would you recommend focusing my previous experience to being applicable in a business or an operations or sales role in a technical environment or in a tech environment?
You want to take it, Carlotta, or I can take it? Up to you.
You can go.
So, I think the first thing is to understand what you do well, right? Understand what you do well, and then also look at what jobs that exist, right? The jobs are pretty descriptive. They get really descriptive on what they want you to do, right? And so if you go through a job board at any particular company, Oracle, McMac, or any company that you look at, they'll tell you exactly what they're looking for in a person. So a lot of those skills I'm sure you've picked up along the way, you can tie that into something, and where you fall short on some of those things, then you enhance the things that you do well. And, and being honest, I think one thing is, if you're honest with yourself and honest with as you're applying to these jobs, it kind of speaks well. I think getting a really good resume writer, to kind of is one skill that a lot of people, I think, don't use. Spend the money on getting a good resume, someone to write a good resume for you, because it will highlight the things that you do well. It's really your elevator pitch or your story before they pick it up. They use technology nowadays to pick out certain keywords. So know more, especially you think about Oracle. Oracle has 150,000 people. There's no person looking at every resume. There's literally a machine that's saying, all right, these are the things for that job that we need to pick out. A good resume writer will speak to those things for you based off the skill set you have. And then once you're there, once you get an interview, being really tight on your story, right? Your story is your story, right? So they read it, but you need to be confident in how you tell your story. I do this really well, here's how I pivot this thing, I picked up this skill along the way, once you get those two things aligned, then normally you can find your way in, right? But I think it's really understanding what you do well and then aligning those skill sets to a particular job. And then once you're in, then you can kind of, if you feel like, what, I'm in a technical role, pivot more to right now, you can start to understand what's added or what's needed to kind of go in that route too. But I think it's just really understanding your story and highlighting the things that you do well, and then making sure that comes to the surface. And then, the other things will just be your story, how you tell it.
Awesome. Thank you.
I love what you were saying about the story. I think it's so important because tailoring the CV to what you're applying to is so important. Choosing the right keywords, making sure that you always have the opportunity to change 4, 5, 6 keywords to make sure that you're matching them to the job you're applying to. And then kind of what I was saying earlier, you could have one experience that is extracurricular that might be tailored towards media. But you can use that same experience in different ways, in different narratives, right? And you can really kind of play with it with different interviews. You might be applying to different roles, but you can make that same experience very relevant to what you're talking about. So it's really getting creative a bit with the pitch you're creating for yourself.
Yeah,
That's great. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I love those answers. I think a lot of people are afraid. They think, am I massaging it too much? Am I getting too creative? No, what you're really doing is you're helping convince the company why you're relevant to them, not to somebody else, right? And you will describe your experiences differently depending on what they care about. And that's really what Howard was talking about is, reading between the lines of what the job descriptions say so you can understand what they care about. I'm sorry if my internet is cutting out here. I'm getting some, looks like it might be, but cool. Anyone else want to unmute themselves and ask a question?
Can I please piggyback off that?
Yes, please.
So my question is, being a fresh graduate, how can you pass through the resume screening, assuming you apply for a big company and assuming you're not coming from a target school or you don't really have a very strong alumni connection to this company? How would you recommend networking or even like just getting past that screening aside from tailoring your resume with the keywords?
I love this question. I'm glad you asked it because I think networking is so underrated when you first finish school, especially because you don't really know how to navigate connections. You feel like you're being a bit invasive. You don't know how to approach people. But my very open recommendation is reach out to people who are in the companies that you want to get to and ask them if they're happy maybe to have a quick conversation with you, or if they're happy to take a look at your CV and maybe pass it internally. I had another session with School16 about a month ago, and I had a couple of people reaching out to me, and I already passed their CV internally at Oracle, because why would I not do that? People, generally speaking, they're very open to help, and they're willing to help. People, it feels good if you're able to help someone, right? So don't be afraid to reach out to people that have a role that appeals to you, and it might simply ask them, hey, can you tell me how you got your goal started? I would be very surprised if they wouldn't respond to you. So I would say go for it, reach out, and ask them maybe some questions, and once you have those questions, and maybe go for your pitch and be like, hey, would you be happy to pass my CV internally? Because that would really help increase your chances to at least have your CV go in front of the HR person.
Absolutely. I agree with you. Yeah, 100%. Same. Everything she said is spot on. Like people natural instinct is to help others, right? People feel like when you watch the news, you think everyone's bad. It's the opposite. There's more good in the world than bad. Like it's just the way it is. Like you feel good about helping people. I helped some guy early in the summertime. He reached out to me randomly, and a couple weeks later he had a new job. So again, it's just that's the best way in, and you'd be surprised. It might be roles out there that they don't even have on the internet yet and someone, there's actually an internal role that is not even on there yet that might be up your alley, or some kind of a program that can get you in. So you never know, but definitely don't be afraid to ask, because at one time that person you reached out to were just like you, they were new, right? Everyone, we all were new at one time, right? So listen, it's a good feeling to help someone, but like I said, it's LinkedIn is right there. LinkedIn is it's out there, it exists. So by all means, don't be afraid.
Yeah, if I were to add anything to those two with comments, which I totally agree with, Tali, is, if you reach out to 10 people and you don't get any response, it's very easy to think like, do they hate me? Like, is my profile wrong? Did I say the wrong thing? No, maybe people are just busy. Maybe 10 wasn't enough. Maybe you can adjust your messaging and make it a little bit stronger. But a lot of people, they give up. They just try once and they say, nope, that doesn't work. Sometimes you have to reach out to 100 people. You just have to tweak and get better at approaching folks. So definitely try that. That's something that we very specifically work with at School16 in our programs, is help people craft their messaging and consistently reach out every single week. They do it as part of the program because it's so effective, like Carlotta and Howard are saying. And then Brian asked a question in the chat here. How do you avoid being complacent in your role? I'm wondering, Brian, maybe you could give us a little more context to what you mean by that. I mean, I think it's important to avoid that, but where's that question coming from? You mind giving us a little context? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, just wanted to introduce myself. Hey, everybody, I'm Brian. I'm working at a high growth startup right now. And I just graduated from Drexel University, got my master's in information systems management. So I'm trying to move on to a role that either applies, where I could use my work experience and my technical skill set. In my role right now, I currently don't use a lot of the skills that I just learned or developed. So I know that, sometimes you just have to, do the work and show to the team that you can provide good results. But at what point do you feel like, maybe you might have to take a risk and do something else, or should you stick around and, maybe avoid being complacent, but at the same time, try to make things happen on your own?
Well, listen, time is your most valuable asset in life, right? Your time is more value. Your time is no more valuable. Their time is no more valuable than your time, right? So vice versa, right? So if your time is not being allocated towards something you want, whatever that goal is in your head, right? You know where you were trying to go, right? But the company, listen, they have an agenda too, right? They want you to do X, right? So if X doesn't line up with your X, then you know what? Then it's time for you to kind of push things forward, right? That's just the way life is, right? Like, you want to make a certain amount of money. If that job you're in is not going to get you that type of money, 9 times out of 10, you're going to make more money going someplace else, right? Even doing the same job sometimes. It's just the way it works, So if your passion is not there, those skill sets that you are acquiring aren't being used, then listen, go out there and start seeing see where your value is. Trust me, you put your resume out there, you start to see what your value is. When people come reaching back out to you, say, listen, we want to talk to you, right? And then once you start having those conversations and say, all right, well, what does this pay? Oh, this pays that. Oh, I'm getting paid this over here, right? So you know what that looks like. So again, there's nothing wrong with, listen, this is the way the world works, right? Everyone has an agenda. Your agenda is important. And if that's what you want to follow, then follow your heart. You know what I'm saying? You fall on your face. There's nothing wrong with falling on your face. That's where you're going to learn the most sometimes, is just falling on your face, right? There's nothing wrong with it, man. It's just like, all right, I learned. Okay, now what? But again, you have a goal in your mind. You know where you're trying to go. You know what I'm saying? But a company, listen, they want you to do a particular job, but 1 and 2 doesn't always match up. And if it doesn't match up for what you need based on what's going on in your own personal life, then sometimes it's, what I beg you to do. There's no hard feelings. You leave on a good note and you move on.
Yeah, no, makes
And
sense.
I actually love this question because it's something that I wish I learned earlier. If you don't ask, you don't get. Literally, the company has no interest in moving you around if you don't tell them what you want to do. So it's really up to you to bringing, everything in your hands and telling them, okay, I want to do more of this. I want to do more of that. Where is the opportunity? And if the opportunity is not there, then it's up to you to decide how long you want to compromise for, how long are you going to stay because you like the company or whatever, until you actually decide, okay, I need to move because I need to grow in that direction. So it's very important to voice what you want to do, because it's not going to be given to you if you don't voice it. it's not at all a situation that the harder you work, the better you work, the promotion comes to you and you're developing as, you know, maybe it used to be once upon a time. It's no longer like that. People that voice what they want to do, they get what they want in the best case scenario. Otherwise, not, I would say.
No, you're absolutely right. And it seems unfair sometimes, right? Like the most vocal people get the opportunities, but that's how it is. So yeah. Cool. Thank you for that question, Brian. That's a great question.
Thanks, guys.
Rudy, it looks like you had your hand up.
Hey, hello, everyone. My name is Rudy Campbell. I'm in Lima, Peru, and I'm an American living abroad with my family. I have a question. Thank you for this opportunity. Does life experience can add value to your resume? In this case, my story, my personal story, I like to craft it so it has an appealing a story for the tech industry, and I feel a little bit afraid that what I'm going to say is going to backfire me. In my case, I'm a dad of 4, outnumbered because they're all girls. And I have a social media account, Instagram, Facebook, all that. I live a life like in a very happy way, and I'm very open to share my happiness. But I feel afraid that maybe somehow in the process, I'm gonna get caught up on all these judgments that by like saying, I don't know, he's a dad and I mean has so many kids, can get the job done, when like I have been like a waiter for years in New York City. I've been a manager, bakeries, very fast paced. I've done few courses. I've been a seller for wine. I'm a sommelier. I can speak about wine and technical aspects of wine. And I have a high curiosity upon technology. So I feel like, again, maybe I'm repeating myself. I'm sorry if I'm doing that. That is the fact that I have a family, a large family, can actually backfire my experience or my life experience cannot enable me to get a role that I wish I could get in a company that I can provide more of those skills that I acquired over the past years. Thank you.
We don't have enough time to discuss this, but I would be really curious to understand why you think this would be a limitation. Not at all, I think. I would be curious to understand, if there's a cultural element that you might have experienced in different countries that have made you feel like that. But I've got lots of colleagues that have like 3 kids and they get on with their lives and they have really good work-life balance. I think tech companies are quite ahead in terms of like work-life balance as well. So I think this is just like a really good story, if anything. I feel like we don't have enough time to really drill down onto this, but I think you should capitalize on this because it makes you.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Absolutely. You're a hustler in my eyes. Listen, you did a lot, so and you're managing your life, man. That's what work is. You balance and you figure things out, but you have a lot of transferable skills. Shoot, I'm a father. I got 2 daughters. So it's what I do, but it's another thing I do. So
right.
I mean, listen, you're fine, man. But feel free to connect with me, man. We can talk, man.
Thank you. Appreciate it. Thank you.
That's great. I appreciate those answers. Our speakers are going to move on here to the next room here in a minute, but you can continue asking questions to the other speakers. Rudy, I'll also add here too that if confidence is kind of the issue for you and you feel like this might hurt you, I also don't think that it will, but I understand the reality. Like not every employer, not every person you're going to be dealing with is a fair human. You don't have to talk about family immediately. I agree that it makes you you, but if you think it hurts you, you can show value in other ways first and then talk about you being a family man later. For example, one way, if you're looking for ways to get more confidence to break into tech, I would start off by applying to any tech company that has to do with, maybe you're starting a company, whatever it is. Start adding folks on LinkedIn. You can certainly add us, and you know what, I'll volunteer the speakers as well. You can add them on LinkedIn. I'm sure they will accept it, because you made it a point to come to this event and ask really great questions. So Howard, Carlotta, thank you for joining. Hopefully you guys weren't cut off in the middle of saying something in the last session, but thank you for joining this breakout. All right.
Thanks.
Not at all.
Sorry about that. I accidentally was moved to another room. That's the perils of Zoom. What I was saying, Rudy, before we get to our speakers here is, any company that sells wine or has to do with distributing wine or has to do with applying technology to wine, I'm just picking that one out because that's what I heard about your experience. Sounds like you know a lot about that. I would take a topic that you know a lot about and apply that to a technology company that's going to value that experience, where you can learn the tech side of things. That's one piece of recommendation, but I would give that recommendation to anybody. If you're transitioning to a career in tech, choose something that has to do with some other area of expertise that you have. Maybe they sell to wine companies, right? And they're going to value the fact that you understand that. So hopefully that'll give you a little bit more confidence to sell yourself when you're talking to those types of companies. And then once you're in those roles, you can move on to a completely different company that has nothing to do with wine, because you already will have had experience in tech. Cool.
Thank you, sir.
Oh, no problem, Reed. Great. So it looks like we have our speakers here, Liz and Sagar. Just really so I know folks have questions for you guys, but just to start off, if maybe Liz, if you can quickly tell us your current day-to-day of your job, and then Sagar, if you could tell us as well. But we'll start with Liz, because I know you just started your company this past year, so it's a little different than it was before.
Yeah, I mean, I think my day-to-day is completely different every single day. So, man, what did I do today? So many things. Basically, like I was focusing before a lot on product and like just looking at every single screen of the app and overseeing design. And then now that we've gotten that out, I'm just completely focused on like marketing. So I oversee, a small team of like social media people who make content for the app. I don't know, so many like day-to-day little things that just come up. So like we're having a brainstorm next week about like how do we get more quality guys on the app, because we've been seeing a lot of like people who put up cartoon photos and just like strange things. So I'm kind of like focused on tackling that problem. But yeah, in general, I'd say it's like just a mix of like right now I'm super focused on like growth and marketing, and then we're going to be entering the fundraising stage soon.
Yeah, makes a lot of sense with a consumer app, especially a dating app. You got to get the users on there, so marketing is probably top of mind for you every day, and of course you have to prove that to investors. What about you, Sagar? What's your day-to-day like? I know you do a lot as well, but maybe if you can give us a quick hint, and then I'll ask people to ask questions directly of you guys.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, our team's main North Stars are improving the infrastructure for our business, improving the operations for our business, and then also improving the profitability for our business. We basically use those three North Stars to figure out what are the initiatives we're going to work on for the year, and then also break it down by quarter. So every quarter, we have a number of initiatives that we work on with product and engineering and the business teams. And so most of the day-to-day is focused on driving those initiatives forward in order to hit our objectives. And so I would say like for a typical week, it's anything from product meetings where we have updates on progress to plan. If there's blockers, how do we get past them, to brainstorming sessions to figure out what should we actually build, what are we hearing from partners. And then a subset of the meetings are also just business updates to leadership. And so I'd say those are probably the three different areas that we're kind of focused on day to day and every week.
Cool. Okay, very helpful. So Liz comes from a background of content. Just do you guys remember, and was at BuzzFeed before, now has her own startup. Sagar had his own company, came from iBanking, and now he leads product operations at DoorDash, which is now, as of recently, a publicly traded company. So folks, I want to give the opportunity, I can certainly keep asking questions, but I want to, again, give the opportunity for you to ask questions directly. So anyone want to unmute themselves and ask the first question?
I have a, oh, sorry.
You can go.
I'll go next.
I'll try to keep it 2 seconds. Oh, short. So I'm still in college and I'm looking for jobs, obviously. So instead of like just relying on simply like applying to jobs, I started my own company making websites for people. And I've actually hired a couple of senior developers, and I think the work that we do is pretty quality. However, when I speak with clients, I sometimes feel like I'm at a disadvantage just because like, oh, I'm still in college, and for one thing, I don't look as professional or older. And I think that's one of the limitations that I just like to get some insight in, and like how to just think about it from like another point of view. Like I've worked on Upwork, and yeah, I was just curious like what you guys would do in my situation.
Yeah, I can answer this one. So I think you should definitely like embrace it and like make it part of your branding identity, because there's so many brands out there that like, want to target a younger demographic. And, you can not only build their website, but like you are that demographic as well. And on top of that, since you're starting out, I'm sure you can charge like cheaper prices, which is like super, super valuable. So I think you actually like have a lot more value than you think you do, and you can make this into part of your marketing.
Okay, cool. Thanks. That's awesome. I didn't realize that.
Great. Thanks, Nick. Awesome. Patrick, you had a question?
Yeah. So thank you both, Liz and Cigar. I really appreciate. I'm sure all of us appreciate you giving us some of your precious time. So I'm a freshman at NYU right now, and I'm just curious. What do you guys suggest if you could, like knowing what you guys know right now, with all of your experience, what would you tell your younger freshman self? What kind of advice would you tell yourself back in the day?
Okay, I can go first. I would tell myself to not be so just like worried and stressed out about like having everything planned out, because you're never going to be able to have everything planned out. And also like the way you're only really going to learn what you like to do is if you start doing it. And I think I tried to figure all those things out like at a really young age. And like I wanted to be a psychology major, but I ended up being business because I felt like that's what I should do. But in the end, I'm just like, man, I still kind of wish I was like a psychology major, because I found that like way more interesting. So I think the advice I would give is just to like follow, what it is you're passionate about, and don't stress about like having your entire life planned out, because it never works that way anyway.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. So I think the two things that I would tell myself are, one would be take initiative. We were just talking about this in the other room, that a lot of folks say they're interested in things and then don't actually do it. And like even me distinctly in college, I was like, I love technology. I want to be in technology. And like, I literally wasn't doing anything to demonstrate that I was interested in technology. And so I would say take initiative. Again, there is no shortage of companies or startups or anyone that if you say, I'll help you for free, would say no. And so those experiences will actually give you the tactical skills to then be successful in whatever role you have after. I think I had seen a question somewhere that was like, what did you find most valuable from college? I actually think that extracurricular activities that I did were more valuable than the curriculum that we learned in the classroom, because on the job, I'm not like practicing something from a textbook. I am doing and building. And so I'd say that's probably been the most valuable thing. So it's a take initiative. And then the second one is just network. I honestly, also when I was younger, I didn't network enough. And it's the relationships that you build that will like open doors. And never say no to like going to a party or meeting with people or going to some event, because you don't know when that person could potentially help you in the future.
Yeah, I love those answers. And I 100% agree. When you're a student, it's one of the best times to ask people for help, to ask for advice, because people want to help you. And Patrick, you're at NYU. NYU is huge. I worked at NYU until a couple months ago. And when I started School16, I ended up leaving NYU, but you have a lot of resources there. I know it.
go to the Entrepreneurial Institute. They pretty much know everybody that's in tech that is in New York City, and you're going to build your over the next 4 years. Forget about the next 4 years. Even this year, if you start, you're going to build your network massively. But by the time you graduate, you're going to pretty much know every company that you're going to need to, and all the founders that are starting companies at the university. You're going to have a huge leg up. So I appreciate those answers. Thanks for the question, Patrick. All right. What other questions do we have? Anybody else want to unmute themselves?
I have a question for Sagar, actually. So you work in product operations, and I've been doing some research, and I see a lot of conflicting advice. If you're looking at a product manager role, it's you need an engineering background. You don't need an engineering background. But then, of course, as I'm delving deeper, there are things like product operations, product support, et cetera. Are there particular functions that you find that a lot of the non-technical folks tend to, do well in terms of at least getting their resume in front of a recruiter, in front of somebody, a human body to look at it and go, okay, well, maybe we'll bring them in for an interview?
Yeah, the term product operations, I've realized, is a very fluid term, and it's used differently in a lot of different technology companies. At least at DoorDash, it is not meant to be a technical role. Really, the crux of what we're doing is the connective tissue between folks and teams that are on the ground with partners, and hearing feedback on how we improve our product, and connecting and prioritizing that with our product and engineering teams. And so I would say anything that has strategy and operations in the term, at least to my understanding, should not be a technical role. If it's something like a product manager, that is more technical. And so essentially we help prioritize and understand what initiatives we should push forward. And then a product manager is actually working with an engineer to build whatever we want them to build. And so it is a little bit more technical.
Okay, and then to piggyback on that, then, so for an applicant looking at something in a product operations or support role, would you then focus on things like, strategy, operations experience, or like something that would then indicate that you at least have the aptitude for those types of, projects or workflows?
Yeah, exactly.
Awesome, thank you.
Thank you, Alyssa. All right, who else wants to ask a question? Maybe someone we haven't heard from. Don't be shy. If someone we have heard from has a question, feel free to jump in as well. Rudy, you got something? Yeah.
Hello. Hello. How are you, Liz and Mr. Pardon me, I have the name. I'm sorry.
That's okay. It's Sagar.
Yeah. Sorry, I missed it. I missed it. But from DoorDash, it's a very interesting company, and I have a question. Since there was this outbreak of COVID-19, what are the challenges or the changes that you have met, and how you deal with them? As a salesperson, I recall going into the field and walking up and down, knocking on doors, and facing the clientele. I have an idea, but I haven't done that since the pandemic started. But probably, do you think that changed the way that sales are done, and how do you deal with them? Thank you.
Yeah, of course. So I think in terms of COVID, the biggest thing that I think it's done for DoorDash and the entire industry is that it's really just accelerated e-commerce adoption. A year ago in March, when COVID wasn't here, e-commerce and getting online to sell was a luxury that was going to happen at some point over the next 3 to 5 years. The thing that really happened during COVID was it was a non-negotiable, especially as states and cities were putting stay-at-home orders and closing in-store dining. And so when you were thinking, I'll do this in the next 24 months, it was like, I need to do this tomorrow or my business won't survive. And so it's really just accelerated e-commerce adoption, I'd say, on the core restaurant space. And then it's also enabled new delivery categories. So I'd say that's what it's done for the business. In terms of the sales question, I think the big thing that DoorDash did was really just enable tooling in order to like connect with partners and individuals that wanted to work with DoorDash. And so things like Zoom or Slack or DocuSign and different tools, that has really helped us continue to keep closing new deals and working with more clients. And I think parts of those will remain. We still as a company find extreme value in face-to-face connections. And so there will always be a balance for that. But I think that's really the biggest thing it's done.
Okay, I understand that. Thank you. That probably, I would guess that it improve a little bit the flowless of communication. Seems like we have the technology and enables us to connect through Zoom and different other applications, right? Okay, thank you so much, sir.
Thank you. Great. We have a couple of questions here coming in the chat as well. Looks like Catherine's curious. We talked about product management, but in terms of product marketing, do you think it requires more of a tech background? And she has a follow-up question to Liz, which is, Liz, I heard you mention you've been dealing with a lot of marketing on your day-to-day. I'd love to hear more about your experience with marketing at in a tech company. Why don't we start with that question to Liz first, and then we can see if someone can address the product marketing question.
Yeah, so I was talking about this in with the other group, but basically with marketing, you know, my goal is to figure out like who is the person. If I had to picture like Gleam, which is the app I'm working on, as a person, like who is that person? And for us, it's like someone who doesn't want a partner but needs a partner, and someone who is living their best life. And Gleam basically helps like fit dating into their schedule. And so once we kind of like map out exactly what our branding and image is, then we go and like create all of our different marketing campaigns from there. So my day-to-day is kind of all over the place. Like I've been playing around a lot with like Clubhouse and like starting rooms there. And also just a lot of like networking. And now that, you know, things are starting to open back up with COVID, virtual events have shown a lot of promise as well. So yeah, it's definitely something I'm still kind of like working on and learning every single day, but it's just a matter of like trying tons of different new things until you find something that sticks. I hope that answered the question.
Thank you, Liz. Yeah, that was great. Catherine, you know, it really does depend on the company. And also some marketing tactics that work at one company or worked at one point in time might not work anymore. So, you know, where are your customers? That's the question you want to ask. For a dating app, it could be events that you do. It could be social media. It could be Clubhouse, because Clubhouse is an emerging new platform with a lot of early adopter type of people that might be willing to use a new app. For a business, if you're doing marketing, you might be doing conferences. You might be doing white papers. You might be doing blog posts and using LinkedIn. So it's your job to figure out, where are my customers spending my time, and what's the best way I can get in front of them there. Anybody have any thoughts on the product marketing question as well? Do you think you need to have a tech background for product marketing type of roles? My thoughts are that, and just we've had product marketing instructors, and I know several people in product marketing types of roles. My thoughts are you actually don't need to have a technical background. What you do want to do is you want to learn how to use certain systems that a product marketer would use. You might want to learn, for example, how to use landing page builders, because a lot of what product marketers do, I mean, the whole job is launching new products and figuring out messaging that will get people to convert and sign up for that product. So, for example, learning how to use a landing page builder like Unbounce or other tools like that will help you run a bunch of A/B test type experiments so you can be an effective product marketer. So it's not about being technical per se. It's about being able to use use tools, systems, and other technologies to help you get your job done, not necessarily being a coder or anything like that. That's not really important at all for that kind of role. Cool. All right, so I think we have a few minutes left here. Anybody have any other questions for either Sagar or Liz, or both?
I have now a question for Liz. So I work adjacent to startups, and I know that you worked with BuzzFeed, and you've now started Gleam and everything. Can I ask, as a startup founder, what is it that you are looking for when you're looking to bring somebody on to your team?
Yeah, so I would say it totally kind of depends on the role, honestly. Like if it's someone who's an engineer, then like I'm looking a lot into their engineering background. Where if it's someone who's like, into marketing, I'm not only like assessing like what their marketing background is, but like, do they genuinely like believe in the idea? That's actually something I really like think about now a lot first. Is like, is it someone who's really excited about the dating space? Is it someone who is going to like spend their free time, doing like research into figuring out how to improve different aspects of the company? Like it's not only just about like the experience, but like also like how much they, care about and believe in the idea. And I think like when I hired people who didn't necessarily feel that way, I found that they weren't as like, motivated to like really do a deep dive into things. So I find that like that's like the number one thing that I look for, in addition to just like their background and their experience.
What about you, Sagar?
Thank
You used to be a startup founder. What did you find was a good way to filter for people that would be successful? Let's say if there was somebody that got her MBA, what would you look for that would make her stand out?
Sorry, you cut off for a sec.
Oh, I'm sorry. When you were a startup founder, especially since you were COO, I'm sure you did a lot of hiring. Let's say you saw somebody coming out of an MBA program. How did you filter for someone who might be successful specifically at a startup?
Yeah, of course. I would really say like one of the things Liz had mentioned of just like passion for the product. A lot of people say they're interested in stuff. Again, like you're going to be living this day to day and like working in it literally 24 hours a day. And so having a passion for the industry and like demonstrating that you've shown the passion for the industry. And then I'd say the only other thing is like bias for action and ownership. And really showing in your previous roles, how have you like demonstrated a bias for action or being an owner at that early of a stage of a company. You're literally just doing whatever it takes to continue to grow the business. And so it's the folks that are the scrappiest, have grit, and like help build a company that are the most successful. And so anything that demonstrates that from their past roles, I think, is what has really stood out to us.
Yeah, absolutely. And
Thank you.
being
That's
a
helpful.
being a startup founder right now myself, and started a couple in the past, that is 100%. It's that kind of grittiness. Are you willing to do what it takes in the company, pick up the pieces, even do the boring work when it needs to get done, or putting out the fires, really. And you can even demonstrate that during an interview process, right? Are you following up consistently? Are you, if you see a problem with the product or the website, or can you mention that to somebody, right? You're really willing to get the stuff done that others might not be willing to do, because at a startup, it's all hands on deck all the time, every single day. And you have to be comfortable with lack of structure in that environment as well. So that's really the main difference: is less structure and probably more work to be done. And you have to do it enthusiastically, even when it sucks. So cool. Looks like we're probably going to be pulled into the main room in about a second here to wrap up the event. But any other final questions that folks might have here in the room? Anybody want to introduce themselves that didn't get a chance to introduce themselves, and tell us why you came to this event? We'd love to hear from you. No? Because I see a lot of folks here that I didn't hear from. Hey, what's up, Catherine?
Hello? Can anybody?
Hi there.
Hey,
Oh,
I'm in class, that's why I've been muted, but she's not talking right now. I just want to say hi, guys. Thank you so much for for coming and talking to us. My name's Kat. I'm a senior. I'm graduating in December from Byrd College, and I'm joining because I'm super interested in getting into tech and going kind of into that marketing world. I've been doing a lot of internships specifically in marketing, so I don't really have a lot of tech experience. I added a minor in tech to kind of get into it and like learn more about it, because it's always been an interest of mine. So yeah, so that's why I'm here.
Awesome. Thank you, Kat. And we might be going to the main room right now, but Steve, you wanted to introduce yourself?
Yes, hello. I'm sorry, I've been a phantom in the room. My name is Steve, and I'm interested in tech. And I have listened to pretty much what everyone has said so far, and it has blessed me richly. And I'm just glad to be here and sharing this experience. I will listen and learn all I can because I have ignored the world of tech for so long. And I just want to immerse myself and get saturated as possible as I can get and move on from there. I'm in a career change. I used to work in the school system for like 20 years. I have just left past last end of school year season. I decided to leave. So it's a whole new world for me. And thank you for having me.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Steve. And I see a lot of folks going from different careers into tech, including education, teachers going into tech. So I'm glad you're taking that step. Folks, we're going to go into the main room now for a few minutes. I'll see you there.
For reference, DoorDash, most folks are probably familiar with the consumer facing app. It's basically you just go onto our app and you can order food. We also have a pretty large business that's called Drive, and it's our white label fulfillment product. So really all that means is instead of it being DoorDash's app or website, it's someone else's app, and then DoorDash powers the last mile logistics for the delivery. So the easiest use case is Chipotle has their own app. DoorDash actually does delivery for them. And so I lead our product operations team for that business. Really what that means is we are the connective tissue between the individuals who are talking to merchants day to day, and then our product and engineering teams to understand, are we seeing common themes? Do we need to set up standard processes? How do we prioritize new product initiatives? And then once we align on what those are, we're actually driving those forward to understand the impact and where we need to shift.
Thank you. That's amazing.
Awesome. Thank you, Sagar. By the way, folks, I have a bunch of questions in my head. So if somebody doesn't ask one, I will definitely ask away. But I see Riley raised a hand. So we'll go to you next, Riley.
Yeah, I have a quick follow-up based on the previous question. What's the difference between that role and a product management role?
Yeah, so product manager is more directly working with engineering. So our teams are consolidating the feedback we are hearing on the ground from partners and the business side, and like sizing impact, prioritizing, and figuring out which things we should work on. Once we figure out these are the 3 things we want to work on, a product manager actually sits down with an engineer and says, you need to do X, Y, and Z to build this product initiative. So that's like the fundamental difference of how we look at it at DoorDash.
Cool, thank you.
I have a question. So in addition to how you described the product manager versus the operations, so for example, I'm in an engineering school, but I would prefer going further towards like the business and the entrepreneurial standpoint. So how would you recommend like currently trying to find like internships and kind of directing that career path? Is it best to know more about the engineering standpoint and get experience to that and kind of transition after? Or is it best to know more towards the operational and the product manager standpoint? How would you balance that at this position?
Yeah, I would say that at least from our team's perspective, it would be more valuable to understand the operations and business side. We have had a number of individuals who have like a very heavy engineering background that have interviewed for operations role. I think the biggest gap is at times there's a disconnect of like, what does this mean for the business? And that's just like also even a trap that our engineers at DoorDash have. And so if you're able to communicate the business impact, that is like really where we find value. So I would maybe lean more towards that side.
Thank you for that, Abby. I have a question for Liz as other questions come in, and I see Abdul, I see your questions. Thanks for dropping in the chat. By the way, folks, if you don't feel like unmuting yourself, no hard feelings. You can drop it in the chat. Liz, I'm curious because now you're an entrepreneur. You're basically doing everything. What would you say is the biggest challenge for you now in terms of like a new skill that you have to activate pretty consistently that you didn't have to before, and how are you actually picking up that skill? Because obviously you're an expert. And you've been in tech for a while, but what are you doing now to fill the gaps?
Yeah, I mean, man, there's so many gaps of things that I just don't know. Like, managing an engineering team or like overseeing product and design. And I would say that I just do a lot of networking, and I also bring people onto the team who do have experience in those things, so they kind of help guide and direct, while we kind of both learn from each other. So like with my CTO, it's like I don't know how to code, but I had someone else come on the team who's just like also interested in helping out with QA. And so kind of the three of us just more work as like a team and a unit now to kind of like help and teach each other. So that's what I found works for me.
I love that. That makes a lot of sense. Clearly, you need to bring on people with complementary skills, but more importantly, networking. It's such a big word that everybody uses, and sometimes it's like, oh, okay, I don't want to hear it again. But you're always going to have to do it, right? And so you need to reframe your thinking about that. It's building relationships, and that's ultimately what gets businesses off the ground. I saw, thank you, Liz. I saw Chris, your hand go up first, so you can go ahead and mute yourself.
Yeah. So I guess this is a question towards Liz. I guess like, it's usually the case that like an entrepreneur with some experience of some kind is usually going to fare like way better than an entrepreneur who just starts off with their idea without getting relevant experience beforehand. I guess how do you know whether or not you have enough relevant domain experience before you start considering and like exploring possibilities of starting your own thing?
I think the most helpful thing to me is not necessarily like experience in terms of like knowledge, but it's more experience in terms of just like managing people. And, that is something I definitely would recommend having before becoming an entrepreneur. And like, if you want to be a CEO, you have to know how to like grow a team and like oversee people. And if you can't do that, like it's really hard to grow and succeed. So I feel like that would be the most valuable skill to have before starting something. But, if the CEO route isn't what you want to take, like if you have a really great idea and it starts taking off, you can always like hire someone else to like manage and oversee people too. So, I think ultimately the most important things is just validating your idea, getting as much feedback as possible, proving product market fit. That's like number one. And then just, having like the drive to just like see it through no matter what it takes.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. Obviously, you're not going to be able to know everything, but usually people that start businesses either start it from their own pain or because they've just been around it for so long, they want to solve the problem, right? So domain expert can mean a lot of different things, obviously, and sometimes you can bring on other people to supplement that on the team as well.
And you're never going to be fully ready to, like at some point you just got to do it.
Exactly. Okay, Song, you're next. Thank you for joining us. Song is in our current program, so good to see you here today.
Thank you, Sergey. I have a similar question to Liz as well, kind of following up Chris's question. So as the CEO and the founder of your startup, have you gotten any difficulty in finding the right people to do the right task? And how did you resolve that difficulty?
Yeah, so it's the hardest part is like finding the right people when you don't yet have funding, because you basically have to convince people to do it for free. So it's a lot of like becoming a salesperson and like really getting other people to believe in your idea. The hardest part for me was just finding the right technical person to actually build the app. And also like I don't have a technical background. So I couldn't really ask poignant interview questions because like I don't know how to code. So I basically got like I had friends who were really technical and I got them to sit in on interviews and like ask the tough questions. And that was like what helped me find the right person. But I think, finding the right founding team is like definitely the most important thing, because it's like a marriage, you guys are going to be together for a really long time.
Thank you very much, Liz.
Yeah.
Thanks, Liz. Georgia, we'll go to you in a second here. I want to go to Abdul's question that came into the chat. This is to Sagar. Can you give us a few challenges your department is currently working on?
Yeah, of course. So I'd say the biggest things that our team are working on are really two things. So one of them is how do we maintain the stickiness with our current customer base? So on Drive, we work directly with partners. So some of our clients are like Chipotle, Little Caesars, this space, as I'm sure a lot of folks are aware, is becoming very, very competitive. And so just offering delivery is not enough to continue to maintain those relationships. And so one of the big things we're thinking about is how do we offer additional services outside of just delivery fulfillment and really continue to build the competitive moat with the partners that we're working with. That's probably, I would say, one of the top two. The second one is how do we continue to innovate our fulfillment platform in order to make our business profitable and continue to grow it. On a similar vein, the space is becoming competitive and competitors are offering very competitive rates. And so the only way that we have an ability to continue to grow the business is by driving our cost structure down. And so we are now thinking through creative ways that we can lower our unit costs in order to help us maintain profitability. I'd say those are probably the two big things that our teams focus on this year.
Awesome. Thank you, Sagar. And by the way, folks, if some of this terminology is foreign to you, it's all good. Feel free to drop it into the chat. We're happy to address that. But I'm going to go back to Georgia now. You can go ahead and ask your question.
So I originally had a question for Liz, but now I thought of one based off of his answer. So I'll ask that one first. But in terms of like finding like partnerships like with like eateries and stuff for DoorDash, like, is it more likely that like people come to you guys, or like how do you decide like who's the proper like fit in terms of like where like the eateries are? Like I know there's so many different options. So like, do people reach out to you more often, or do you guys reach out to them? And how do you know like if you would want to work with a certain eatery versus not?
Yeah, of course. I would say that for the larger partners, it's definitely a push and pull. So there are partners that come directly to us and they understand that DoorDash is doing extremely well in this space and want to work with DoorDash. There are other partners that know their brand is very strong and they have a lot of leverage and negotiating power, and we're going to them. So I'd say for the larger partners, it's depending on who the partner is. For the smaller partners like the mom and pop shop in New York City, or folks that are a little bit smaller, they're generally inbounding to us. I would say that they're like more interested in enabling online ordering, and so they're coming to work with us. In terms of how we understand who we work with, really, I think the biggest thing is that it is a partnership, and we really don't want to just be seen as a vendor. Even though we are providing services and we are helping grow their business, it also needs to be a mutual relationship where they are giving on things and helping us collectively grow both of the businesses. And so the folks that look at it as a partnership and relationship to grow both businesses are the ones that we want to work with.
Awesome. Thank you, Sagar. And I guess, Georgia, you can go ahead and ask Liz that other question if that's still a burning question for you.
Yeah, so I'm like right now I'm an intern, and it's like for social media marketing and stuff. So it's all about like making like brands like stand out and like have a presence on the social media like in like that area. So like how, like what sets like your like innovation and what you're trying to do apart from like all these other things that already exist?
You mean like from all the other dating apps, or you just mean like social media in general?
I guess both, but like my original idea was like all the other like like your competition basically. Like how do you prove that to people?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it's something that like is basically going to be my job for the next forever, is like doing that. So I think the most important thing is to like decide like first off just like who your brand is, like almost as a person. Like if you could paint them as a picture, like who are they, what do they like doing, what are their hobbies? And we set Gleam as like basically a more of like a lifestyle brand. It's like for people who don't need a partner but like want a partner, and for people who are focused on, you know, living their best lives in a sense. And Gleam is there to help like the way it works is you schedule a date. It's like Calendly kind of meets like dating, and it's video first. So the idea is that it helps like work around your schedule. And so we want to paint this picture of the brand as like, you know, a person who's just like basically like living their best lifestyle. And so from there, we then create all kinds of different content that kind of fits into that brand image. And we've had, you know, a lot of success with that, along with the design that we did for the brand as well. So basically you just have to like kind of figure out like what it is your brand represents, and then like everything you make kind of like trickles off from there.
Thank you, Liz. We only have 5 minutes in this room now, so I'm going to go to Astrid next because she didn't have a chance to ask a question. Go ahead, Astrid.
Hi, Liz. So when I was in high school, I was an avid BuzzFeed watcher, and I remember you in those videos, so I'm kind of starstruck right now. So I was wondering what made you decide to start your own company? Because I've seen like many people who were former BuzzFeed employees became YouTubers, and I just wanted to know what made you decide to take a very different path.
Yeah, I think I just always like learning new things, and I felt like I've kind of learned all I need to learn about video production. And while I still really love it, like I felt like I was kind of just doing the same thing a lot, especially, you know, you have to make so much content all the time, you get kind of burned out, honestly. And so I also love the idea, like as an executive producer, you kind of oversee everything from start to finish. And I really liked like that aspect of it. And so through just a lot of like, I don't know, networking and conversations and like talking to therapists too, it's like, it just kind of made me realize like, oh, I do want to basically take the thing I love about executive producing and apply it to something else. And I wanted to do like an app because I just had never done one before, and I found it like really, really interesting. And I'm much more of like a math science person, so I liked being able to apply those skills, and I like that things were much more like black and white than they were, you know, in like viral video, where it's like it is data driven, but it can also be like really random. So I think all those things just made me start getting more and more interested in pursuing this path. And again, the only way you find out is if you start doing it. So I just started working on it pretty much every night, like super late at night while I was working at BuzzFeed. And yeah, I just really liked it and I learned a lot. So I'm just still going this route and seeing where it takes me.
Thank you for that question, Astrid. All right, we have a few minutes left in here. I'm going to go to Ethan next.
Hey, Sagar, I had a question for you concerning kind of the nitty-gritty day-to-days of the operations role. Obviously, you're having to be a problem solver, collaborate with people, but I was really interested in like what percentage of your time is really spent interacting with teams and with customers and gathering feedback, and how much is spent collaborating with your team kind of over how to solve those problems, and how much is just staring at a question on a computer screen, trying to rack your brain to figure out some kind of a solution yourself.
Yeah, of course. So I would say, so just to give you a reference point of how the team works, every quarter we will gather all the data points that we've had in terms of like customer feedback, what partners are saying. And as a group, we figure out what are the biggest problems we want to tackle and what will be the business impact. So that's like, I would say at the start of the quarter. Then intra-quarter, how our time is split is, I would say less time in the beginning is focused on customer feedback, mainly because we are like building the solution based off of the original feedback that we had heard. And more of the time is spent on like group collaboration, figuring out how we can get around blockers. And so I would say 40–50% of our time is on that piece. And then like 10% is talking to customers. Once we roll out at different initiatives, then I would say it starts flipping, where more of the time is spent on customer feedback, mainly in the sense that like, hey, we've rolled this out. How is this interacting? Do you need, like, are there changes that need to be made? And then less of it is group collaboration and problem solving. So I'd say like that's kind of the mix shift of how it lands every quarter.
Thank you, Sagar. All right, go to Chris. Moving along.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if we have time for this question because it's kind of like a broad one, but I guess like, you know, when you're thinking about like internships and first jobs, especially in the first jobs area, you guys mentioned that there's like a range of options. Either go to like a very like big legacy like consulting or investment bank outfit, or like try your hand at like some early stage thing. I guess like who should try what? Because I guess there's like a very big like risk reward trade off with like trying to go for like a get experience with like an early stage company early in your career versus trying to go for like a more like legacy outfit that's been around for like 100 years. So I guess what kind of person should start with what for like a first job or like a big internship or something?
And I guess we'll go to Sagar with that question first.
Yeah, I'm trying to think. It's a really good question. So like when I was in trying to figure out what I wanted to do, candidly, after college, I didn't know what I wanted to do, and banking and finance was the route that I knew I could go down and still keep majority of my options open. And it was just a safe route. I was more risk averse. And I appreciated that. It continued to keep as many doors open for me as possible. And so I'd say like maybe if you're more risk averse, go down the finance and consulting route because you know it's a structured role that you will like continue to see more and more opportunities. If you're more risk tolerant, then the startup experience is something that you can go down.
Yeah, I think that's a good answer. Liz, do you have any different feedback?
Just to add to that, I really liked starting in what was more of a startup after I graduated because I just got to grow really quickly with the company. And I also got to just like learn so much that, I kind of like learned as I grew with the company. So I really liked that. And I think I have a lot more skills now having done that as opposed to like starting at a bigger company where I had a much more like narrow scope of work.
Thanks, Liz. Song, we won't have time for your question right now because we're going to be moving the speakers. So thank you, folks. You're about to go into different rooms, but everyone that's here, sit tight. Song, we're all going to come back into the main room after, so maybe we'll have time to answer that question that you had.
Right. Thank you, Sergey.
Thank you, Sagar and Liz. We'll see you in the main room. You probably got a prompt to join the other room now. All right, folks. And by the way, while we're waiting for the other speakers to come in, because I can hear Sergey talking to them, and it looks like they're entering here. Don't forget, this is networking. So if you see somebody that, maybe you look them up on LinkedIn, you think they have a good background or something, that's interesting for you, maybe you're starting a company, whatever it is, start adding folks on LinkedIn. You can certainly add us, and you know what, I'll volunteer the speakers as well. You can add them on LinkedIn. I'm sure they will accept it. Because you made it a point to come to this event and ask really great questions. So Howard, Carlotta, thank you for joining. Hopefully you guys weren't cut off in the middle of saying something in the last session, but thank you for joining this breakout. All right, folks, so as a reminder, Carlotta Zorsi, she does, what's your can you repeat your title again? Is brand partnerships effectively at Oracle?
Yes, I work in brand partnerships. My role has many different names in different companies. So it goes from client services to consulting to account management. It's basically looking after clients with the goal of retention. So it's very much geared towards making sure that they're happy, that they're seeing value in the product that we're selling them, and that we're giving that extra edge to make sure that we get sticky and they keep renewing the contract with us.
Got it. That makes sense. And of course, Howard is a sales director at MakeMac. How big is MakeMac now, Howard?
Wow, we just got over 100, so we're growing pretty quick. I was hired number 41, and that was 9 months ago. So we're growing tremendously. Yeah, we're a rocket ship.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, hopefully it's measured growth, not dysfunctional growth, because that happens quite a lot too.
That happened, but no, we're okay.
Awesome. Okay, folks. So again, I can ask questions all day, and I do have some burning questions in my mind, but would love for you to jump in. And I see Astrid is the first one here, so you can go ahead and unmute yourself, Astrid.
Okay, hello. My question is for Carlotta, and I was wondering, how were you able to come to the US for work as coming from abroad? And also, like, my my big professional goal is to work in London. And maybe if you have some tips from coming from overseas and from like in a non-EU country.
Right. Where are you based, Astrid?
Dominican Republic.
Right. Okay. So I managed to work in the US because I moved there as a student. Whilst I was there as a student, I was able to get work experience. So it all started through that. And then the summer after, I got it's kind of a work experience visa. So it all started through university. I really capitalized on that opportunity because I knew how hard it was going to be to actually get US experience coming from the EU. So that was the first question. And the second question was, so working in London, do you know what, that's quite a big question because I'm not quite sure about what the regulations are at a global level, but generally speaking, I think transferring overseas becomes very easy if you start in a big international company in your local area. So you start from your country, you do your job for about a year, and then you start working on a case that shows why it would make sense for the company to transfer you over to London. I think this is the easiest way because many global companies offer this type of opportunities nowadays. And I think it's a lot more direct than going directly and applying to a company that is based in London. Because, why would I hire somebody from overseas if they already have the people locally, unless it's something very specific? If potentially a company is looking to open start a team that is looking to expand in the you said Dominican Republic you are? Maybe they're looking to expand in that market specifically, then you would have a very specific USP for yourself. But if not, I think starting from a global company locally would give you that opportunity, more directly.
Thank you, Carlotta. I think that was a great last point there. Obviously, you're in DR, you speak Spanish, you have access to the Latin American market that could definitely be valuable for somebody, so that'd be a good way to start. All right, Ethan, I saw your hand up first, so we'll go to you next.
Hey, I've got a question for Howard. So follow-up is obviously inherent to a good sales campaign, but I think that there's a difference between follow-up and badgering leads in a sense. And from my experience in a bigger company sales organization, it was high volume calling customers. And then an interview I had with somebody who had worked at Salesforce, there was just a lot of repeated touches of leads, in a sense that it was very often you would be hitting the same people on a weekly basis. And it just felt to me unethical in a sense to basically just be contacting people until they were either fed up enough to buy your product to get you off their back, or just to totally flip out at you. And so I'm wondering if that is a hallmark of the sales environment or the tech environment as a whole, or whether that's very organization dependent and you can have more of a system that's if you're going to contact the same people, at least have a decent enough space in time so that something could have changed, something in the market could have changed, and you're not just exasperating people.
So that's a multifold question. So it depends on what you're selling, right? I'm not me personally, I don't sell phone books, right? So I don't, I go after my typical sales are over $100,000 each, right? Well over 100,000, right? So in that type of level, you're not badgering anyone because it's multiple people that need to sign on to buy it. The sales process is a couple of months easily, right? So it's what you sell, right? And then secondly, and I don't know this guy that you're talking to, if you're constantly if your book of business or you're talking to the same people to a point where you're kind of beating them down, then he's not doing really any prospecting, because there's an endless array of people that can buy from you if your product is your product, right? Like even at Salesforce, right? Salesforce has many levels, right? So if that was what if his book of business was those same people he had to constantly badger, then as a salesperson, he wasn't doing his job. I would, because you have to, you can go out and find other SMBs or small, medium business size companies that may fit that criteria that you can go after. But the follow-up is, you have to follow it with a purpose though. Like if you're following up just to say, all right, I called you yesterday and you didn't answer me. All right, well, if you're going to call me 2 weeks from now, what else is new that I need to learn if I'm a prospect? Like if you didn't say nothing 2 weeks ago and I said no, then what else new are you coming with me 2 weeks from now if you're going to call me again? Right. So you can't just follow up just for follow-up's sake, like, because that's not going to push a deal. Like when I follow with the same people, 9 times out of 10, I didn't tell, I may have left something out that first time so I can follow up the next time. Like, all right, let me not give them all this information because I know that if I need to touch them again, I need to give them something new to keep them on a carrot. All right. And you also have to remember, if you're talking to any particular person or potential sales prospect, listen, your product is important only during that time when you're speaking to them. They have a life. They have other things they're doing. They have other things going on that may be not even in their thought in 2 days. Like, oh snap, I know that was important when I had that conversation. Now I went on with my life. You know what I mean? And you need to go back to them and reevaluate or pitch them again sometimes, just to be able to say, listen, I know we talked about this 2 weeks ago, but let me double down and make sure we remember it. Let me tie it back to the things that you spoke about that were important to you, and this is why I'm reaching back out to you. So again, there's levels to this, right? So don't feel like that's the experience for everyone. No, there's not. Because there's also people at Salesforce that are making millions of dollars. Some of the top sales guys over there are making millions, like, what I'm saying, because they're selling enterprise deals. So it's just a matter of what the company is and what the product is. And I think as a sales, if you're thinking about a sales role, you want to sell something that you would buy, even if you were in that role. If something that you believe in, because if you believe in it, you're gonna want to sell it. If you're like, I don't even believe in it, then it's hard for you to muster it to want to sell it again or get up and talk to people about it, because if you don't believe in it. Does that make sense?
Yeah, so it's kind of a combination of both the product and your process, and having a good mature sales process, and not just, okay, I'm just calling a bunch of people to try and get leads.
Oh no, because there's jobs like that out there. They exist, trust me. I was in college, I was selling some kind of insurance product once upon a time, but yes, but there's levels to this. There's, everyone's a salesperson. Even if they don't think they are, we all are in sales. Every one of us, every human, we're all in sales. You know what I mean? It's just what you're what you're pushing that energy towards. But that's not the norm. It can be your norm if you want it to be, but it doesn't have to be.
Sure, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thanks, Howard. Definitely been there before, where I've sold products that I didn't believe in, and let's just say it sucks for everybody involved, especially the salesperson. All right, Sherry, I see your hand up. You can go ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing your career paths. So my question is, how has the COVID-19 pandemic impacted your company on a business level, and what has changed in your team structure?
So we'll go to, yeah, go ahead, Howard.
I think Carlotta, you want to answer first?
Yeah, sure, I can start. So I can't really share much detail about like impact on the business. I would just say I think COVID probably impacted many businesses in different ways. I think some businesses probably benefited from it. Like think about e-commerce, for example, that's like skyrocketed. Yep, over the last year. I would just say one thing that I probably can mention is I've definitely noticed a slower uptake in terms of new roles coming up. Things have been a bit more cautious when it comes to adding new headcounts, but I feel like now things have started to open up a bit. So I think things have started to take a good turn in terms of confidence for the next few months. So yeah, does that answer your question?
Yeah, it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. And again, it depends on the line of business, right? My particular business that I'm in e-commerce acceleration, right? So our business actually took off. It grew almost it's 500% since COVID started. So we've been hiring like crazy in the pandemic, right? Because that's our business, right? We've have companies like Kellogg's and Nestle that normally before COVID, they didn't, they wasn't selling any of their products online. With COVID, as we all experienced on this phone, on the Zoom, things we couldn't get because stores were closed or we couldn't go nowhere, right? At the beginning of the pandemic. So a lot of companies had to pivot to now say, all right, we need to be able to get our products to be able to be sold online until you can get it to people, so that shift has changed, right? It's not going back. In some respects, some things are going to go back into some normalcy, right? Certain things you're just going to have to go in and buy in the store, but a lot of companies and we've all adapted, to a way of being at home and clicking something and getting it to your front door, and being happy with that. So it just depends on, the company and what they push. Would be the impact of COVID, right? In this current environment in which we're in.
I'm gonna actually, I see Abby, you raised your hand. Chiara, I saw you had your hand up earlier. Do you still have that question or no?
Yeah, it was answered. So thank you.
It's answered. Okay, awesome. All right, then we'll go to Abby next then.
Oh, okay. You got muted, so I was confused. So my question is more so like towards your work-life balance for both of you guys. You've risen up to like higher roles currently, and I know you've mentioned that in order to be noticed, you really do have to work late hours and late shifts and kind of sometimes maybe like give it more so you're all to be noticed. How have you guys created that balance between being overly ambitious to and also like being able to get to the role that you have? Does that make sense?
Well, tech companies nowadays are very cognizant of work-life balance. It's not the same. Like when I first started, it wasn't really a thing. It wasn't a thing at all. As things have progressed, especially in the Zoom environment we're in, like you're on Zoom all day long. We have Zoom fatigue. It's something that you may have heard of. And some things that we've instituted at my company is there's no internal meetings on Friday, right? I'm a sales guy, so I make my own meetings, right? We have now, if it's not an important meeting, you can go off Zoom, right? A lot of times when I'm working at home, I work at home, I turn my Zoom off. I may be cooking, it may be a meeting on, I'm just listening in on it, so that element of getting what you want and working crazy hours and all that stuff is not really the same as it used to be. I'm just speaking from my own experience. I'm talking 15 years ago at this point now, right? But now, if you're in a company, it's really about raising your hand, and Carlotta spoke to this point is there's opportunities out there. It's a person that was actually on my team that was my SDR, and she raised her hand to go to client success, because it was just something that she felt that was a passion and there was a need there. So she's transitioning into that team, so it's just a matter of, putting yourself out there sometimes and going into a different place to try or taking that initiative to say, listen, I'm going to take this on, and be that person, and to take on a new role. But it's not, that working crazy hours and all that stuff. That's kind of more of a antiquated thinking process nowadays, because people are really thinking about the quality of life. I think one thing this pandemic has definitely brought to the top is work-life balance and mental health, right? There was a one and the same almost, because these pre notions of before of like, oh, working, like for what? Like what is, at the end of the day, it comes to a point, if you work too much, you're less productive, right? There's a certain amount of time where you're just enough working that you're productive and it benefits the company. So, that's kind of the way things are nowadays. And I think your guys are in a good place if that's kind of, what your aspirations are. It's probably the best time ever to really be coming into this type of space and really thinking about all the different ways you want to kind of move your career, because it's right now it's very, people are very conscious on things, that how things used to be and how things should go more than anything.
Yeah, everything is moving from working harder to working smarter. It's not anymore about working until 9 in the evening or 10 or 11, whatever I did at the beginning. But also as you move up slowly through your career, it's more about how much you do. It's more about like the output that you give. So if you're able to give the best output in 1 hour instead of like 5 hours, nobody cares. It's about working smart.
Thank you.
All right, we have about 5 minutes left here. Actually, I'll go to Song first since we didn't get a chance to get to your question in the last session. Go ahead, Song.
Hi, my question would be, since like the pandemic, a lot of tech companies were having remote like work from home. Do you think this will become a thing even after COVID pandemic? Like, would it be more and more popular in the tech industry?
Yeah, 100%. I think some companies that are a bit more traditional thinking, Oracle, will probably maybe want to maintain a little element of the office culture, just because they want to make sure that they offer that opportunity to people who also need that space outside of the house to be able to concentrate and work, maybe away from the kids or whatever. But I think there's definitely more acceptance now when it comes to working from home. I'm very much looking forward not to have to commute 3 hours a day anymore. And it's something I was trying to advocate for even before this whole thing happened. And I can definitely see this becoming a new reality, a lot more flexibility moving forward in the tech industry as a whole, I think.
And I second that as well. We have employees in 19 states. So we've hired more than 60 people just remotely, and you have to think about the companies too. That's a big overhead for have a central location. Like, we're going to have one. I mean, Oracle has one. The company's going to have one, but the productivity is really what the companies want. Like, if you're more productive just being home in your own house in your pajamas, that's what they want. As long as you get the job done. Like that's all. Let's get the job done, right? Like, you're happier, you're more professional, you're more productive. That's all they care about. Like, so trust me, you're in a great time to be entering this space.
Thank you very much.
All right, we have a few minutes left here. I'll go to Chris next. Your hand was up first.
Oh, sorry, was that me?
Yep.
Okay. I guess really quick as just like a piece of advice, I guess, for us as students. What's like a skill or experience that you find really, really compelling in like new applicants to your fields, but is really, really uncommon? So like, what's like the sort of like best bang for buck types of skills and experiences to sort of invest time into?
I think extracurricular, like, if you're all on the same path, then what makes you stand out, right? What are you doing with your time? Like, what are you doing? Like, wow, listen, we've all been in college. I know I've been, like, you made your own schedule. I know I made, like, when I first got in school, I was like high school. I was going to class early and then had the afternoon to myself, and then as time went on, I had other things to do, right? Like, I had other things that was important to me. I ran track, I played football, I was on a Caribbean, I had a lot of things I was doing, right? So I think anytime you're looking at a company or a company looking at you, they're looking at, all right, well, they know what school looks like. You're not there all the time, right? You have a lot of free time in college. So what are you doing with your time, right? What are you spending what's important to you, right? And if you're selling that, and saying, listen, I've done other things outside of just going to school, being internships, that's still a thing. That's still a big thing. Like, if you want to get into this space, go to companies and give them your time. Your time is your most valuable asset. You don't got to get paid for it if you're still going to school, right? Some people, and there's a lot of paid internships, but sometimes you may not get paid just to go out there and say, you know what, I'm going to go in this space and try this particular role and put that on your resume. That speaks volume, because that says to them as a potential employer, this person is interested, or they're out there at least trying to get into this type of situation. So being flexible and giving your time outside of just going to school, right, I think is going to make you going to stand out more than anybody.
Yeah, and I think we were discussing it with the previous group as well. Like, the same type of extracurricular experience you have can be tailored to your specific narrative, right? So even if you have one extracurricular experience, whether you're going for a sales role or a client servicing role or a marketing role, you can really tailor it to sell it for that specific role. So just go for what you're passionate about and then make that pitch for yourself when you're going to interviews.
Thank you both. All right, last but not least, I saw Abdurrahman, your hand went up earlier, so you can go ahead and unmute yourself, ask a question.
Yeah, my question was already answered, but thank you so much. Thank you.
All right, awesome. I see here Alexandra dropped a question into the chat. Will there be startups that will take a David stance to the Goliath mega companies, Amazon and Zoom? Are there any signs of small companies willing to try to take away a chunk of those markets? I'm not sure who wants to address that, but basically, obviously, you have a lot of these big companies that are squashing smaller startups.
Well, the name of the game is acquisition, right? That's just the name of the game. Like these companies, the behemoths, the reason why they're so big is they buy companies that are doing the things that they may be interested in. You know, right now we're my company particularly, you know, we're on a trajectory to go up to IPO in the next 3 to 4 years. That's one of the reasons why I even joined. But there's also a possibility we may not get there, right? As much as we want to, listen, it may be a company that says, all right, here's $500 million and you can take a walk and, and we, I have stake in it. All of us have stake in it, right? So I could, my CEO and the board would be like, all right, well, here's 500 million. Everyone's going to eat, because everyone has stake in it. And that might be the trajectory we're on, right? So it's just the name of the game, and you can see it's everywhere, right? Look at TV. Like TV, there's only 4 networks. Look at the food you eat. There's only 4 companies that give you all the food you got. Like that's just the way it is. You think there's all these different brands? No, there's Nestle, there's Conagra, there's who's else? There's Kellogg. There's only a couple of companies that run all of this. So it's the name of the game. So it's no different in tech.
Yeah, there's the dinosaurs and there's the unicorns, right?
That's it.
Awesome. Thank you, folks. We just got the notification. We're going to be brought into the main room now, it looks like. So sorry, Chiara, that we didn't get to your question. But thank you, everybody, for your super engaged questions. We really appreciate it.
Thank you so much.
And we're just going to have a few announcements at the end here as we wrap up. You might have to click on, let's see. May have to click on leave room. Let's see. It looks like folks are, there we go. All right. Hey, Kristen. I hear Sergey saying that he'll see us here. So Sergey, come on back here. I'm going to take off these AirPods so that we can
wrap up the session for the day. All right, and kudos, by the way, folks, for making it to the end of the session. We started off with 55 people. There are 32 of us now, so you guys are all champs. And of course, obviously, I'm going to second what Jessica said in the chat. Thank you so much for the panelists, Liz, Carlotta, Sagar, and Howard. Super insightful information. We just started to scratch the surface with this stuff, but obviously only so much we can do in a few-hour event here. I'm going to share my screen really quickly here as we wrap up to make a couple announcements. We're going to drop the survey chat into the link. Once again, if you want to dive deeper into some of these roles, and if you're interested in non-technical roles in tech, we encourage you to apply to our acceleration program starting in June. Even if you're not sure if it's a fit for you, go ahead and submit your application. We'll schedule a program interview call. At the very least, we want to provide some direct career feedback for you. So definitely you won't lose anything by submitting your application, even if you're not sure. This is the survey link. Kristen's going to drop it into the chat right now. If you submit the survey, we will be more than happy to send this recording for you. So again, thank you for all the feedback that you are providing for us. We do take that very seriously. Our next event is 2 weeks from now. If you RSVP to this event, you will hear about it again. But it's going to be with Sheila, who is the director of product at PayPal. I didn't even try to pronounce her last name, which is why I just said her first name. But that's sure to be an awesome event as well.
I bet Carlotta can. That looks Italian to me, but I'm not sure.
Is it? Let's try it. Carlotta, can you do it?
Guastamacchio?
Hey,
Maybe.
that sounds right. I like it. And I like how somebody said your name really well earlier, Carlotta. That's in the real way. So please join us in a few weeks. Similar format. It's going to be Q&A, and you'll have a chance to meet the speaker as well. Last but not least, you can follow us on Instagram, School16 Co, or LinkedIn. You know, just type in School16. You'll see us pop up. You don't have to memorize this URL here. But again, thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. Again, thank you so much for the panelists. We're going to wrap up right now, but we hope to see you all at a future event. Thank you.
All right. Thank you all.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Thank you all.
Have a good one.